Okay, we should be set.
Thank you so much. And welcome everyone. It is 7 p.m. on October 13th, 2020, and we are now in our regular city council meeting. Let's see. Summer, please take us through a call to order and roll call attendance. I'll call this meeting to order and please take us through a roll call attendance.
Okay, we have Mayor Emily Niehaus, Carly Castle, Assistant City Manager, Joel Linares, City Manager, Kaylin Jones, Moab City Council, Karen Guzman Newton, Moab City Council, Clint York, Finance Director, Lori Simonson, City Attorney, Mike Duncan, Moab City Council, Ronnie Duressery, Moab City Council, Tawny Knutson Boyd, Moab City Council, and Chief Brett Edge.
Thank you, Summer. And as we discussed at our last meeting, our next item on the agenda will be citizens to be heard. Summer, I'm going to ask you now to please, everybody that is in the waiting room, please bring them into the meeting.
Will do. Give me just a sec. Okay, Mayor, we have a total of 13 people in the waiting room, and we will turn off the video for those folks until it is their turn.
So for those of you that are in the waiting room, welcome, and thank you for coming in and meeting with us virtually. I do want to ask that if you are not commenting, to please go ahead and exit this meeting and follow us on YouTube. But if you do wish to speak, then I'll say, then I'll just ask you to stick with us as we go through our citizens to be heard section of the agenda. And because there are 13, you said 13, Summer?
That was how many I admitted from the waiting room.
Okay, I would like to ask you all to please limit your comments to 2 minutes so that we may get through all of the comments and have time to get to our agenda item, which some of you may be commenting on tonight. So, please limit yourselves to 2 minutes. And Summer, I'll leave it up to you to bring people in or to activate people by their name.
Okay, I'm just gonna go down the line as I see them in order of appearance, if that is okay.
That's
and
great.
The first person is Trish Hawkins, so I will ask to unmute. Hopefully she can hear us.
I can. I am listening in. I'm not going to make a comment, so I will go to the YouTube if that makes more sense for you guys.
I think it does, and you'll probably have a better viewing and listening from.
Oh, and I'll be making my comments afterwards once I've heard you all. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
The other thing we should mention is that if you are watching on YouTube, there is a delay, so you may want to turn your YouTube feed off if you're in the meeting right now.
Okay.
Okay, who's next?
Thank you.
Summer, who is next up? Summer, you're muted.
Sorry about that.
No
We
worries.
should have Lori Taylor.
Thank you. Lori Taylor, welcome. Feel free to turn your microphone on and your video on. And Summer, you can turn hers on as well.
I've asked. Looks like we just have a slight delay.
Okay, you should be on now.
Lori, go ahead and turn off if you've got YouTube going, or if you've also called in, you'll want to turn those other things off.
Okay, so I'm not going to comment, so I'll go to YouTube.
Okay, thanks for letting us know.
Thank you.
Summer, who is next?
I don't know how to leave.
Let's see, I have Dal Taylor. Let me.
Okay, Dal, you are unmuted. You are welcome to share your screen, your video, start your video and make your comment. Dal, can you hear me? This is Mayor Emily Niehaus. It's possible that we're just waiting for on a delay from YouTube. So we'll just hold for another few seconds.
I don't see that there's an audio connection, so that might be a problem.
Dal, I see that you're, oh, Dal, Taylor, are you with us? Summer, let's go ahead. Oh. All right. We've got a very fuzzy video.
Very fuzzy video and no sound.
Dal Taylor, it looks like from our end, you are not muted. So it's perhaps that you have a microphone to turn on. Now you are muted on our end. Now you're unmuted.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Hi.
Welcome.
Great.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining
All
us.
right.
Supposed to state your name and tell them what your comments are, but do you have any comments? That's why I went to you.
So I don't know if I have any comments yet, but I'm here.
Okay, Dal, well, we are at the citizens to be heard section of our agenda. And so this is the point at which in our regular meeting, citizens have a chance to comment on things on the agenda or otherwise. And so this is the only chance to speak. But if you hear something in our meeting tonight and want to respond, you can certainly email the council at an email address that's on our agenda, on our website. So Dal, would you like to
Okay.
make a comment or shall we say good night for now?
I probably don't have a comment, so I will probably join you on YouTube.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us on YouTube and we'll see you later. Have a good night.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. Summer, who's next?
We have Eve Tolman.
Okay. Eve, welcome. Eve, I don't know if you can hear me. This is Mayor Niehaus, but I see that you're unmuted on our end. And Summer, I'm not sure if you could go ahead and help Dal leave the meeting. Oh, there we go. So Eve, I'm just waiting on you to join us here and make your comment.
It's possible that it may be one of the iPhones that have popped in. I'm not sure if maybe that connection didn't work.
Okay. I see, yep, there's an iPhone. The iPhone that I see is muted in the event that that is Eve attempting to call.
We can ask the first one to unmute to see. It's a little bit clunky. I apologize.
I have mine muted and I won't be engaging in the conversation, just listening.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know who this is, but I'm so glad that you're joining us tonight. But if you do not intend to make a comment, then what I would suggest that you do is head on over to our YouTube page, Moab City in YouTube, and you can watch the entire meeting from there as opposed to being in our Zoom meeting here. So if you do
So
not-
my name is Brett Stewart. We've met before with Utah HV Advocates. I'm just here to listen in, and I'm up on top of the mountain, so I don't have internet. So if you don't mind, just mute me and I'll stay right here if that's okay.
Okay, I just want to let you know, though, that we've got a very long meeting and lots of items to discuss before we do get to an item that I think you might be interested in. So
I'll just try to hang tight. I'm not getting engaged in the comments tonight.
okay,
Thank you.
we'll just move you, I guess, into the, what we could do for you is move you into the waiting room, and Summer, we can just move them out when we get to our UTV item, if that's what you're interested in.
Do you mind just muting me?
Okay, well, I suppose we could do that too.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And who is next for a citizen to be heard?
Should have Jess O'Leary.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, Commissioner O'Leary.
So I know, thank you, first of all, for taking my comments. And I know lots of people have wrote letters expressing concern with noise of OHVs. And so I'm not going to comment on that. I'm going to focus my comments on another OHV issue that I see, and that is one of safety. So in House Bill 82, which was passed in 2017, line 83 states a windshield unless the operator wears eye protection while operating the vehicle. So in other words, you must have a windshield unless you're wearing eye protection. And I sort of bring this up because as I was leaving the gym the other day and this line of OHVs went by, you know, I see a dad and his toddler and infant in an OHV, and the toddler and the infant do not have protective eyewear, and there is no windshield. So the parts of this law that we can enforce, I think, need to be enforced very strictly. Otherwise, we present this, you know, laissez-faire, all things go kind of attitude for our city and county. So I would say that parts of this legislation that we can enforce, we should.
Thank you for your comment tonight. Summer, who is next?
We should have Shane.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I don't know that I necessarily need to comment. However, I did send in comments. Do you prefer that I read those, or do you prefer that I just let you guys read them? It's fine either way with me.
Well, because we have, as of the start of this meeting, we have 58 comments that were submitted to this council. I will not be reading the individual comments on our Zoom tonight, but your comment will be posted with all other citizens to be heard comments by noon tomorrow on our city webpage. So you are welcome to read the comments that you submitted online, or you can just join us on our YouTube feed and follow us along as we meet this evening.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't need to take up extra time reading something that you will already read.
Okay, well, thank you for calling in and participating, and we have a good night. We'll see you later.
Thank you much. I'll move over to YouTube.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Mayor, I did receive an email from Eve, and she did not have a comment, so she must have been disconnected. And that, I believe, is all the folks that we have in the waiting room for citizens to be heard.
I have a Margie grandma.
Oh, let me see. Oh, sorry about that. Yes, let's unmute her.
Yep.
Hi,
Thank you.
Margie. Sorry.
That's all right. And I appreciate you noticing that. I did send in some comments, and I'm hoping that you all received that. And my comments are related to the UHV vehicles and the noise. We live on 100 South, right across from the ballpark, a block away from Ronnie. And it's, you know, it's outrageous to, you know, as I said in the letter, and I said much more, it's just crazy to even be there. I feel grateful that right now I'm in California for medical reasons. So I don't have to listen to the noise, because what I've heard is that it's been extremely outrageous right now. And my question is to all of you is there any chance, I mean, is there really any chance that something will be done?
Well, stay tuned, because we're going to be talking about that later at our meeting with our attorney and our chief. Thank you. Did you have any further comments you wanted to add?
No, I'm just really hoping, because I know that, Lucy Wallingford mentioned in her letter, and other people are feeling like, okay, so we've been complaining about this forever and nothing ever changes. So are we here wasting our time again, or will you folks, do something to help us? That's all, and I will stay tuned.
Okay, thank you so much. And have a good night. You can follow us on YouTube, on our YouTube page. Okay, Summer, I am just going to check in with you. Let's do a final sweep of the waiting room, make sure there are no other people sitting out there in the waiting room hoping to comment in tonight's meeting. And is there a way to hide the iPhone box so that as we're meeting, we're not made to look smaller in
I will look. I do have 3 more people, or 2 more people. I have Steph and Jalen Hawks in the waiting room, so I will add them.
Okay. So Steph, it looks like so we're gonna go ahead and welcome Steph to the meeting. And Steph, if you want to unmute, and you're welcome to share your screen and make your comment this evening.
Yeah, I guess.
Okay. So Steph, it looks like you did talk.
Oh, hi there. Actually, Steph's.
So we're gonna go ahead and welcome Steph to the meeting. And Steph, if you want to unmute, and you're welcome to share your screen.
It is unmuted.
Can you hear me?
And make your comment this evening.
Can you hear me?
You go ahead and mute YouTube, please.
Oh,
So
sorry.
Steph, it looks like
Hang on.
Sorry, we're late to the game.
not a problem.
Okay, go ahead.
You are welcome to share your video as well.
Oh, I don't look like Steph. That's my wife. Hi, everybody. I just literally walked in the door from being out on the trail. My name is Dave Hellman, and I am own one of the tour companies in town. And I didn't know when we were going to get a talk, but this is kind of in the very beginning of the meeting. I know there's 2 very different sides to this whole deal, and we have a lot of things to talk about. I guess the one point I really wanted to make, I know that the aftermarket exhausts are definitely annoying. It annoys me. We own multiple side-by-sides. All the tour companies out there, none of them run aftermarket exhaust. So I think that should be taken into consideration when you guys make decisions about the tour companies versus the rest of the people out there bringing their side-by-sides into our town with their race exhausts. Honestly, I know you guys are talking about a curfew, and I think I don't know how well that's going to work out, because it's somewhat of a profiling thing when you start putting a curfew on certain vehicles and not on others. But I think the main focus should be on if the law enforcement is going to be doing something about this, every muffler has a DOT approved number on it if it is street legal and those meet decibel requirements. It's the guys bringing these, you look right on the mufflers and it says for race use only. And those guys are going out at night and driving around the neighborhoods and stuff and driving through even Main Street. And they can be ear piercing and annoying. And I definitely think that something should be done about the aftermarket exhausts. If you're driving through town with illegal exhaust system, those are the guys that should be, not to say targeted, but pulled over. And if you're not compliant with DOT rules, your vehicle's not street legal at that point. And I just feel like that's the focus should go towards that, because a lot of the stock side-by-sides don't make a whole lot of noise. I know that they do kind of have a buzzing noise to them, but I think that the aftermarket exhaust is really what the what's ear piercing that's driving people nuts. I think that's really just all I had to say on the side-by-side thing. I think that was the two main things, was the curfew and the noise, right? Or are we shaking their head? I don't know.
Okay.
That's really what I wanted to comment.
Well, I really want to say thank you so much for calling in tonight and having your comment heard. I very much appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a good night, and feel free to follow us on YouTube to watch our deliberation later on this item.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye.
Hi.
Bye.
Hi.
Oh, geez.
Summer, who's next?
We have Jalen Hawks that's still joined. I'm not sure if she is here for citizens to be heard, but she is the last one that we brought out of the waiting room.
Okay, Jalen, if you can hear me, go ahead and unmute and share your screen, and welcome to our meeting if you'd like to be a citizen to be heard. Oh,
No, I'm just in preparation for next week's meeting, so I'm just listening, just an interested observer. Is that okay? May I do that?
yes, you are absolutely welcome to stay in Zoom. Another option is you can go to our YouTube page, and we're live streaming. And so as
Okay.
taking up a square in our Zoom land, and you
All
can,
right.
you can pause if you need to with YouTube. So,
Okay, thank you.
okay, good to see you. So let's see, we'll go ahead and, okay. And was it possible to do a,
I have not figured out a way to remove the iPhone from the view.
okay, I just got a message that Karen was removed from this meeting. So
Let's go grab her. I don't see her yet.
maybe she,
I just figured out how to hide non-participants, so we shouldn't see the iPhone list or name anymore.
okay. And keep looking at the waiting room, because I guess Karen will be joining back in with us. And let's make absolutely sure that we've got no one else in the waiting room. So
I have no one else in the waiting room. I hope that I did not remove Karen's. That makes it difficult to get her back. So let me work on her real quick.
Okay. While we're doing that, I just want to state here now, before we move on from this agenda item, that we have, as a council, received 58 submitted comments. And so while all of us will definitely be reading the comments that were submitted for citizens to be heard for tonight's meeting, we will also be making those comments available we will be making those comments available by tomorrow noon. And if you go to moabcity.org, our website, and you click, I believe it's your government, at the top, gives you a drop down from your government, and you press the button City Council. It'll bring up a page that, if you look on the right side of the page and down to the bottom, you'll see the date, October 13, 2020. And that, if you hit that date, then what will happen is it will bring up all of the comments that were submitted for citizens to be heard. Looks like we're having technical difficulties getting Karen back in on the meeting.
I'm working.
Okay.
Mayor, I was just going to tell you, she did text me.
Yeah.
To say, yeah. So I told her we're working on it.
Yeah. Okay. Let's just hold for just a moment to see, to give the opportunity for Karen to get back in on this meeting. And I might as well just say to this council and staff that are with us, thanks everybody for your patience. we've done a great job in meeting virtually, but citizens to be heard is a complicated feat.
Okay, I think I can bring her back in. I apologize. Well, this is fun. Sorry about that.
Alternatively, we could end the meeting and we could all come back in. Then that would change the recording. We'd have essentially 2 recorded meetings. Reminds me of one of my favorite songs from the movie Napoleon Dynamite. I think it might be like a scene at the very end where Kip is singing to his brother a song, and it's like, I love technology. Not as much as you see.
So, Mayor, would you want to start on council members' reports, for example, while we're waiting for?
Well, our next item on the agenda is administrative reports, and I'm not sure that
Mayor, I have Karen on the phone. We're trying to get her back in.
Okay. Well, while you guys are working on it, I think it's probably safe to move forward and she can just YouTube this section that she's missed. All right, so next item on the agenda, administrative reports. And actually, before we move forward, Joel, I want to give a quick update, a COVID-19 update, if that's okay with you. So I don't know if anyone's been following what has progressed over the course of today, but we're seeing some stuff, and I wanted to share with you. Jen Sadoff, who this is the CEO of Moab Regional Hospital, did share some notes with me to share with all of you. She apologizes she can't join us for tonight's meeting. The University of Utah and Intermountain Health, those are hospitals that if something were to happen, if somebody locally were to need an ICU, that's where we'd send them. And U of U is out of beds, and Intermountain Health is at 92% capacity. So we're seeing there are huge spikes happening in rural towns all around the state. We are considered in the moderate transmission category. So she's still trying to figure out what that means. And that social gatherings have been limited to 10 people as of today. And they're considering, if not having already done, a statewide mask mandate. But it is looking like somewhat of a new system.
It is. It was, the governor did a press conference. It was quite lengthy. And the recommendations and the conditions were laid out in that press conference, but it didn't go so far as to mandate a statewide mask order, but
okay,
it could.
But she's definitely saying limiting social gatherings to 10 people or fewer for the next 2 weeks. That masks are required in areas of high transmission, but that she will be submitting, she plans to submit send out a briefing to all of us tomorrow. Because they're still trying to get all the details together. But I just wanted to report that. And so as part of the COVID-19 update for tonight's meeting. Okay, Joel, take it away.
So thanks for that, Mayor. We so often in government only hear about everything that's wrong, and everything you just said. I want to thank the county attorney and county manager, Chris Baird, for being out in front on that issue and getting a mask order for us long ago, keeping our numbers much lower than they've been statewide for a long time. They're still mulling whether or not they need a mask order statewide, and we've had that criteria and been kept a lot safer for a lot longer through our local leaders, and can't thank them enough for having the foresight to get out ahead of that. So as the state catches up, because they have to, we'll watch that happen, I guess. So City Hall is open for business. We did have a COVID incident here at City Hall. We took care of it, and personnel were followed CDC guidelines, and that issue has been handled. And I want to thank the city staff, especially facility staff. They immediately came in, bombed the buildings, took care of everything. You know, they're first responders as well. When we find out that we have COVID in certain areas, they're the first ones in to clean it up and take care of it, so the exposure is limited to those who have already been exposed. So I can't thank the staff enough for what they do, coming in the middle of the night to take care of that, to try and keep us operating and open to the public so we can keep doing the public's business. That said, we are open, and welcome everyone to come in whenever they're ready. I want to thank the staff as well and the mayor for what last week the executive and the administrative bodies had a legislative visitation from Senator Adams, Senator Hinkins, Senator Andrick, Representative McKell, Representative Gibsons, and Representative Watkins to the city, and the county participated with us as well. They came down and we let them experience what our tourist economy feels like to a local. Didn't necessarily try and tell them all the problems we had. We actually let them experience them. And I think it was very eye-opening, and I can't thank them enough for being willing to experience it the way that they did. The items on our agenda and the things we took them and showed them were all the things that we hear constant complaints about. And we showed them in a way that we didn't have to point it out to them. They literally just were put in the situation and then watch their eyes open as they went, I can't even hear you because of the semis rolling down the road. And I was like, So I want to thank them for being willing to come and listen to us. And it was a great visit, and I hope they'll come back soon. And we have a lot more to see. It's not tourist based, so I really want to thank them. Salt shed is repaired down at the shop. It's up and operating, and I want to thank Levi for taking care of that. Had a lot of illegal dumping along Cane Creek over the last month or so. We've had a lot of bike thefts within the city. If people see something, please report something. If you see something that's out of place, call it in. You see someone doing something that they shouldn't be doing, call it in. So we need help. There's too much going on for us to be everywhere. And so we need help. And if people see something, we really appreciate it. Election is 3 weeks away. Everyone, please vote. Regardless of how you vote, please vote. Prop 8 is on the ballot. Please consider that. The government change for the county is on the ballot. So we just want to remind everyone the ballots are going out. You should be getting them. Please educate yourself and vote according to what you think needs done for this community. Your guidance goes a long ways through these elections and letting us know what we need to be doing. So please, everyone, take the time to vote, especially county where the ballot comes to your house. No reason to not fill it out and get it sent back in. It can be easier. So that said, I have Chief Edge, who is going to give us a brief update real quick. And then Finance Director Clint York is
Thanks, Joel. Is it my turn?
It is.
All right. So I wanted to give you a brief update on the status of our investigation into the series of bike thefts that we have had over the last roughly 8 weeks or so. We have had multiple officers invest time into the investigation, and over the period of the last 2 weeks or so, we have arrested 4 individuals at separate times, all of whom are involved in the bike thefts. There are more who are still outstanding. There are still bike thefts occurring, but we do continue to build that investigation. We've, as I mentioned, arrested 4 individuals. We've recovered over 20 bikes, and we are continuing to work information that we're receiving and proactively, without revealing too much about tactics, we are proactively engaged in the investigation. So it's been a difficult one, but making the first arrest allowed us to identify some other involved individuals and start working our way, not necessarily up the chain, but along the chain to identify and arrest some of the other involved folks. So we're making progress with it, but in the meantime, we're asking that people, as Joel has mentioned, if you see something, call and let us know. We will dispatch an officer immediately to look into it. Lock your bike. All of the bikes that have been stolen have either been unlocked or have been locked with a simple cable lock. We recommend using something like one of the U-bolt locks or a hardened steel chain lock, which require power tools to get through, whereas the cable locks, you can just use bolt cutters, or in some cases, even just wire cutters. So do what you can to protect your property as well. Out of sight, out of mind. If you have a garage, it's the best place for your bike. If you don't, use one of the locks that I mentioned to lock them to a pole or something that is stable and immovable. And it would probably even be worth it to put tarps or something over the bike so that they're not quite as visible. If you have motion sensor lights and or surveillance cameras, those are also useful. We actually, not from this particular incident, but from past incidents, we have video of someone who was approaching a house, presumably for reasons of no good, and the motion sensor light went on, and you can almost see a trail of fire behind them as they ran away. So the motion sensor lights are helpful, and so are the surveillance cameras. So that's where we stand right now.
Thank you, Chief. Again, they will cut the cable locks. They will take the wires off. So do what you can do to keep your property protected.
Thank you.
I'm up. All right. Tonight, a quick update. Since there's so many items on the agenda. Turn down my volume. A budget and also a sales tax. Next meeting, I'll probably go over all of our funds independently and give kind of a breakdown of what's going on. Also, next meeting, we'll be going over the nonprofit and church water rates, sewer rates. The study is, we're almost there with Susie with Zion's Bank on that one. It's coming to an end. And then in early November, the auditor will be giving his audit report. So with that, I'm going to share my screen really quick. It says the host is disabled participant sharing screen. Can you enable that, please, Summer?
I will. Give me just a second.
Thank you. All right, you guys see it? Let's see there.
Yep.
Is it the big screen or the small screen? Are we on the big one?
Well, we can see we can see your next slide. So we see one slide and the next slide.
Let's see, how do I swap that? I don't know how to here. Display settings, swap. That better?
That's great. Thank you. Thanks for asking. Looks great.
So first slide here is just the general update of where our sales tax data is. On the little box to the left, it shows we got our preliminary numbers today for October, which is August. And August came in with, August and July, which is October and September, they both have come in 109% of what we did last year. So in terms of sales tax, Moab City has recovered somewhat. I mean, we're on the road to recovery, let's put it that way. You can see that, our low month was June, and it's been building up all the way from there. So kudos to everyone that, Moab's busy. Everyone knows it. You can see it. You can't get into town without a long wait. So it's kind of where we're at there. Now, I will have solid numbers for October here in a week, but that's where his preliminary numbers came in, and usually they do come in slightly low. So I'm guessing these might be up closer to maybe 114% of last year.
Clint, is that a typo that November of last year exceeded October?
November would have been September, but no, it's September. September was very busy last year.
Wow.
Yeah. Next slide. The slide on the left is just the last 3.5 years of data. And the yellow is from July forward of this year, our fiscal year. And you can see that we're above where we have been. Let's put it that way. So in comparative to where we were, 109%. If things keep creeping forward, we can maybe start to make some of that money back that we lost during Q2 and Q3 of this year, or Q1 and Q2. On the box to the left, so this is our sales tax revenue for this year compared to budget. So our budget number was, as you remember, we never ended up changing our budget. It was the same budget that we always went with. We never ended up doing any COVID changes to it. So there were some pretty high numbers in there for us to compare to. But for September and October, we're pretty much right on par. In the last slide, this is just our expense comparison for just the general fund. Like I said, our next meeting, I'll go into all the funds and show where our revenue and expenses are. But if I compare in that middle text box there and kind of I don't know, that might be a peach color maybe. For July, August, and September for Q3, if I can take what we spent in the general fund expense compared to budget, we were $913,000 under budget, or 71% of budget. If I take our expense on the blue box in the bottom and I compare it to what our expense was in those same months last year, our spending was $841,000 less than the year prior, or 73%. So, and the way I took that budget number is, since the city, we only budget annually and not monthly, I just took the budget, that overall annual budget number, and divided it evenly by 12. So you can see our expenses are way down, and our revenue is coming back in line in terms of sales tax. And that's just kind of a quick breakdown of where we are. And I'll try this next meeting when we might have a little bit more time to dive deeper into it. Any questions?
Let's go ahead and unshare that screen. Thank you, Clint. That actually provides a little bit of relief and is definitely reflective of what I'm hearing in town. Karen, is that your hand?
Am I still unmuted?
You're good now.
Oh, okay. No, I'm just curious. So, Clint, the numbers for the prior year and the year that we have now, they look the same to me. I'm sorry, I'm looking at this on a phone and it's super tiny. Didn't we have to do adjustments?
For the budget?
Yeah, I mean, so the last page that you showed.
The last page that I showed for the budget and the prior year expense numbers they were close, but they were different.
Oh, okay. Is there, okay, if you can just forward that, then I can digest it.
I'll forward it to you, and if you want to give me a call tomorrow, we can go over it.
That'd be awesome.
I'll forward that to the group. The expense numbers are the same, the actuals, but the budget and the prior year expense numbers are slightly different.
Clint, this is Ronnie. Do you mind sending us all those slides you just showed us?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Helpful. It was just quick. So, okay.
No problem. And I've got another file that has all of my sales tax stuff in it. I'll attach that as well. And if you guys ever have any questions, feel free, and I'll do my best to answer them.
Thanks, Clint, and thanks for this report. And we look forward to talking with you again at next council meeting and continuing to dive into this. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Joel, anything else?
Sorry, I'm trying to get my headphones to work so I don't hear you echoing in my other ear.
Oh.
No, that's it, Mayor. That's all we have for tonight. So.
Okay. Karen, are you struggling because you can't use your computer and you're stuck on your phone?
Yeah, and then because my phone's about to die and it's plugged in. Summer can't get me back on the computer.
Everyone, would you be okay can we end this call and then everybody zoom right back in and just resume? Because we've got a long meeting and I think that's going to be very frustrating if you're on the phone. Although, Kaylin, that means you got to call back in.
I'm not sure it will allow Karen to come back in. I haven't been able to figure that one out. So we'll try and see what happens.
Try by.
Do you guys want me just to sign out completely and then try to, or will that not make a difference?
No, I wouldn't do that.
You guys, I'm good. I'll just watch you on the phone and YouTube.
Okay. All right, then let's move on. We're now at mayor and council reports. I'll go first and I will be brief. So to follow up with what Joel talked about with the visit with our legislators, I was, again, very grateful to the 6 that showed up. And Joel went through the list of who did attend. Let me tell you a little bit about what we did. So they arrived and I whisked them away to the river where we were in masks and following protocol for riding in vans and kept our 6 feet. And if we couldn't keep our 6 feet, we wore our masks. We now originally back when I invited them pre-COVID, they were all going to hop on my raft and we were all going to be together. But we did end up renting 2 larger rafts so that we could keep our 6 feet distance. And I want to thank Joel and Carly and Clint for joining me on the river. Carly in particular for rowing her boat, and I was paddle captaining the other boat. It was really a lot of fun, and we had such a good time. Then we came back to town and we had dinner together at Pasta J's right downtown so they could see exactly what we were talking about in terms of congestion and noise. And then we walked up to City Hall where we had an ice cream social, and I was grateful for the county folks that joined us for the ice cream social to reiterate what we're working with here. All in all, it was about $1,260. The reason why we felt good with spending that money is because of our lobbying efforts, in particular, to get the millions of dollars that are still left undistributed by the state. We were definitely talking to the legislators about how we would spend that money. And it seems like we made a pretty good case because at the conclusion of their visit, they seemed very, very supportive of Moab's unique need because up until this third tranche distribution was based on population. And when we're a small city, but we're set to service, millions of visitors each year, that CARES Act funding distribution is, a bit more complicated for us. It doesn't really fully compensate us. And another thing, if I would have gone to Salt Lake with a hotel and per diem and travel, if I'd have been up there for 3 days to try to meet all them and have, conversations on their turf, it would have cost roughly the same amount of money. So I think it was good timing, and that was the effort there. And that was just a portion of what was spent. The legislators did pay for their lodging and their travel, and most of their meals here. So we did share the cost with the legislators. What else? Our conversations weren't about any particular policy. The conversations that we had were about quality of life, and they were about what we would spend CARES Act dollars on. And as you all know, if you don't already, well, maybe I should inform you. So I also attended the League of Cities and Towns annual convention and our board meeting. So where we are with CARES Act funding in the state is that the state is figuring out how to spend the third tranche of money, the third pocket. And so I will let you know that as a board member, I also advocated with the league to make a special effort to include resort communities in kind of a special allocation of funds. So to be continued there, but at our board meeting next week, we'll move forward with how the league is going to lobby, but it's not likely to be a population distribution. So again, all that to say, Moab is in a really good place to ask for, a different distribution than other communities, because we were so adversely affected from other communities. Let's see. If you'd like, I can share with all of you, I'll go ahead and share with all of you what we're advocating for through the league. I'll do that after this meeting's over. Let's see, some updates. Student of the Month is back in full swing. The Market on Center this Thursday, it will be the last night that we have a Market on Center. So I hope all of you can join. I've been attending Walnut Lane meetings. I just wanted you all to know that that I have been participating in those with Caitlin and staff. I wanted to thank the Chamber of Commerce for hosting a RAP tax chat with us. I think that was really informative. I virtually attended the Rural Summit and my Governor's Rural Partnership Board meeting. Commissioner Curtis Wells is also on that board, and he and I co-presented on housing affordability strategies that are going to be implemented in that plan. And why that plan is such a good big deal is that it's a plan that the governor uses to set priorities. One of those priorities is, how GOED is maneuvered. And so I'm really grateful that we from, Grand County and Moab City were kind of in lockstep in presenting on housing together. He largely touched on the high density overlay that is going to likely be a real good example for other counties in the state, especially counties, not cities, because, we already have that density, but for counties to really utilize that. And I will share, once we pass as a board the final strategic plan, I'll share that with all of you. Couple more things. I participated in a 2.5-hour phone call with Bud Bruning, the director of UTV Utah, and Ben Burr, who is director for the Blue Ribbon Coalition. And we talked back and forth for about 2.5 hours on strategies and how we could work together. I reiterated that it's all about noise. And And, you know, I also reiterated that a lot of the comments that I'm hearing tend to be, you know, just make law enforcement deal with the situation. And I will say it got a little heated when I fiercely defended my chief and the police department in saying, you know, it's not just an enforcement issue. And so that being said, you know, we'll be talking about that more tonight. And then finally, Congressman Curtis was here all afternoon with us, and he participated. So the chair of the Grand County Commission, and I helped him set the agenda. He attended a climate roundtable. He attended, and so that was co-hosted with Science Moab, an organization in town. And then it was off to a public lands roundtable. And all of the land managers showed up, including our new superintendent for arches. It was a great showing and a great conversation. And then finally, here at City Hall, and outside, we hosted him to discuss housing, and then he bopped over to Star Hall and finished with the Chamber of Commerce. So very grateful that we have a congressman that cares about our issues and comes and talks to all of this. And thanks to all the staff that helped kind of set that up too. And that is it from me. So next we'll have Ronnie.
I'll be brief. I had we meet twice a year for meetings of the Southeast Utah Riparian Partnership. The city signed on to an MOU with them to have a city rep, I think all the way back in 2007 when they were the Tamarisk Coalition with Mayor Dave, and then David Everett when he was city manager. Re-up that, and they're now known as the Southeast Utah Riparian Partnership. I was just gonna tell you guys, I mean, because I go and this happens so infrequently, there isn't much time to report, just to help you. So their mission is that they're committed to supporting, informing, and advocating for the restoration, protection, and maintenance of healthy riparian ecosystems in Utah's Colorado River watershed. And so they're actually a bunch of different agencies, nonprofits, and individuals working on projects to improve riparian areas in Southeast Utah. And so a lot of what we discussed at this meeting, which was out at the Mayberry Preserve, can't complain about sitting outside there for a meeting, was about the different interagency projects that have been going on. They're now in their fourth round. 1 a year, and different agencies involved include state fire forestry and state lands, nature conservancy, plateau restoration, the Moab Field Office of the BLM, Grand County Noxious Weeds, and they have been monitoring and working on getting rid of non-native species on a very impressive number of acres. We don't have time to go into details here, but just so you guys know, they aren't just working on tamarisk these days. They also are dealing with knapweed, ravenna grass, I always pronounce it wrong, goat heads, Russian olive, and elm in some places. And just some interesting things that came out of that are they've been working on some apps and new ways for them in the field to deal with monitoring species and doing like a 30-minute quick site assessment. So that was kind of fun. We all got to play with those tools. There's, for any of you who are interested, just let me know. There's some very impressive reports about the projects that have been going on for the past few years, the vegetation response monitoring findings, some of the interesting things I just thought would be interesting for you guys who are interested in climate is that, and this probably won't come as a surprise, but as we're seeing these warmer winters and years of lower flows in the river, we are seeing expansion of non-native species, which has implications too detailed to get into here, but important. So we had some good presentations on ravenna grass and the non-native Phragmites. From that presentation was by the Park Service. And it's just a very interesting group of people who are doing really interesting long-term work that's telling us a lot more about the area. And I think they're making a big difference. So hopefully at some point, maybe we can come have them report at some point. But it's quite interesting for any of you who spend time on the river. There are probably a lot of sites going on there that you didn't know about. Like I learned they're trying to open up an old channel above New Rapid that was historically there for restoration purposes. So I guess I will leave it at that because there's just too much. I'll pass on to Mike, I guess.
Thanks, Ronnie. Yeah, Mike, you're up.
I've been conversing a little bit with Phil Gardner. He was the USGS hydrologist who has done a lot more water chemistry work on our aquifer up here. Very interesting report, and it's sure to be an important subject. He basically thinks that we're withdrawing the amount of water now that's actually recharged. I'm talking about the wells now that, by the golf course and the springs the city draws out of, not necessarily the rest of the water in the valley, but that's the stuff that matters to the city. And we're withdrawing now about what's actually recharged high in the La Salles. It takes 2,000 or 3,000 years for that water to actually get down to the spring. So there's a lot in storage, but we're right at the so-called safe yield limit right now. And state law says that we're not supposed to exceed that. So that'll be an important factor. So Dr. Gardner has been very responsive and very helpful, and I am so pleased to learn a little bit more every time I talk to him. Second thing is UTV noise. I did go out one morning years ago. I wrote an app for phones, take videos. Turns out Kevin Walker, you guys know him. He's on the County Planning Commission, and he's been doing the same sort of thing. We had very similar experiences. He was using a phone. I was using a more calibrated meter with a peak reader and so forth on it. But both of us went up and basically tagged UTVs. I was up on Sand Flats Road, for example. And sure enough, they are noisier than a lot of other vehicles, but not by a huge margin. It's kind of tricky picking them out. All I got to do is let off the gas a little bit and they kind of come back within compliance. But Brett, one of the things that I noticed, Brett and I have gone round and round a little bit. Brett thinks it'll be necessary to have checkpoint areas with a lot of officers and and be very careful about only measuring one vehicle at a time because the meters are directional. I don't think it's going to be as big a problem as Brett thinks. But anyway, we'll talk more about that later on. I appreciate his feedback, of course, on all of this. But we'll talk some more about this perhaps later on tonight. But Kevin and I are both kind of headed to the same point. We think metering is the way to go.
All right. Thanks, Mike, so much. Next up, Tawny.
I don't remember when I last reported, so if I've said this before, I'm sorry. And I will try and get through it pretty fast. Last month, the mayor and I attended the candlelight vigil for suicide awareness. It was a really, really nice place, a safe place to talk and to remember and to share experiences with other people. It was not very well publicized this year, so I hope next year that it will be a little bit better attended. But for a first year, it was still a nice, it was a nice evening. The Canyonlands Healthcare Special Service District, I think last time we had a real meeting and we talked, Ronnie had asked about the sales tax split for EMS and the district. It is, the county did decide on a 60-40 split, which is what it was. And so the percentages will stay the same. When I wrote this, there were still no cases of COVID in the care center. There was one employee that tested positive, but the employee had not been in the care center for 2 weeks. He or she was tested positive, went right home. So that did not, as of our last meeting, that did not transmit to any of the residents or the other staff. But at that point, the staff was following CDC guidelines and testing staff and residents every day. And I'm reporting on 2 district meetings. The last one I attended was last Thursday, and I only stayed for about an hour because we had our closed session. I just wanted to give you guys a heads up that there will probably be coming to us an application for a minor subdivision. It includes some property that the district owns and the hospital owns. The hospital is looking at expanding it, so they possibly want to do a land trade or a land swap, but regardless, the minor subdivision has to happen first so that it all works out equitably and fairly, and so that the city has a nice straight road somewhere instead of that curvy one. And also the district had their annual audit, and it was 2019, they were in good shape. 2020 is yet unknown, and we'll see what happens on that one. I attended a couple of webinars. One was the intersectionality of race and gender, which was through the Women's Leadership, Utah Women in Leadership group. It was really fascinating. I will send, if you are interested, I will send you the links. They are either on YouTube or they're just on the Utah Women in Leadership Facebook page. And I also attended a webinar with Utah Women in Leadership today. That was Utah Women in 2020 Challenges, Opportunities, and Next Steps. It was with Dr. Susan Madsen, Liz Owens, who is the director of YWCA, Robin Scribner, who is a consultant, and Becky Jacobs, who is a reporter for the Trib, who is assigned Utah issues. And it was actually really, really informative and fun. You sit there for an hour and a half and think, where did the time go? And then I also attended some bias training. We had talked earlier about getting a little bit better bias training from the trust. This is from the Utah Local Governments Trust, not the league. And I can also send you the link for that. Chief said that he also attended this. It was a little different perspective than the trust has come up with before. I thought it was a little bit more in depth, and it delved into some real life issues and how we can mitigate our own biases and identify them. And like I said, I will send you that. It was also pretty interesting. And HASU canceled their meeting last month because they didn't have an agenda item, but there is another meeting this week. The museum's last meeting, they are still working on their visioning, mission, and values statement, which appears to be kind of an ongoing project. But they are doing their Tuesdays at the Museum series. And if anybody wants to join to be a museum member, it's probably really, really worth the time and investment in your community. And I think I have another meeting with them next week, so I will update further. Sorry about that. Thank you. Oh, and I'm going to excuse myself almost at the very end because all my figures for the bills are out in my car and a sticky note. So I'll get up and I'll run out there fast.
Thanks, Tani. Okay, Karen, you're up.
Okay, so since our last meeting, I've had 2 airport board meetings, one on September 29th. I just want to let you guys know passenger employment numbers are reportedly down 34% over last year with a 24% load factor. But we are seeing improvements each month. Historically, September and October are our busiest months, and employments are below the 10,000 mark for FAA to receive airport funding. But since it's COVID year, there's exceptions to where we're at. But this year we are only at 4,800 employments. Then I had another meeting on the 5th of October with the airport and just the new schedule. There's Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday, there's 3 flights to Denver, one at 10, one at 2:55, one at 5:15. And then on Thursday, there's 2 flights, and Saturday, there's 2 flights. Our new airport director and Armstrong were able to finalize the capital improvements list project for the next 10 years with the FAA, which is a good thing. And then I had a chamber board meeting. They are definitely struggling because they're having difficulty having luncheons and it decided not to do the annual chamber banquet in October due to COVID implications. There was an overwhelming response to filling one of our chamber seats this year, which is great to see so much active participants. I mean, it went down to, this is the first time in the chamber's history where they had to send the vote out to all chamber members because it was a tie between two candidates, and there was probably close to 8 who applied to be on the chamber board. I was in a discussion with UDOT and consultants regarding transit. That was one of the first kickoff meetings to figure out, to find out that UDOT was going to pay for a transit study, not a study, but to a concept report that we could present to the Transportation Commission, and then participated in a discussion with UDOT and staff regarding off Main Street parking. We've had 2 Arches hotspot committee meetings. And then last week we had 1 virtual town hall. Just a reminder that it's going to be super exciting tomorrow night out in the Sun Court. We are having our first in-person town hall regarding the hotspot projects that the committee is considering. So I invite everyone to come out and join us tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Karen. And Galen, you're up.
Thanks, Mayor. I attended multiple Arches Hotspots meetings, as Karen mentioned, and I attended a housing task force meeting, which was largely devoted to going over the presentation that we saw earlier. I attended a small meeting between City, County, and Solid Waste District to try to get the first steps of better coordination to solving valley-wide solid waste issues and have more coordination between the different entities. So hopefully that bears results that will be coming our way soon. I've been having some conversations to prepare for the city comments for the Manti-LaSalle forest plan pre-scoping period, which we'll be considering probably in December. The schedule that the Forest Service is putting out is a little fluid. So that's what I've got.
Thanks, Kaylin. And I'm just wondering, I'm pretty sure that I put Mary O'Brien on our agenda for coming up here. I don't think she's on our next October meeting. I think we might have pushed her. Let's visit to make sure that her presentation to us coincides with the time needed for that work.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to the council for all of your diligent work. And we are now moving on to section 6 of our meeting, approval of minutes. We've got minutes from 4 different meetings. September 8th, our regular meeting. September 17th, a special meeting. September 22nd, a regular meeting. And September 30th, a special meeting. Is there a motion?
I so move to approve the minutes from September 8th, September 17th, September 22nd, and September 30th.
Thank you, Karen. Is there a second?
I will second that motion.
Thank you. Mike, comments? Oh, seeing none, I will roll call vote. So sorry, we just pulled up the roll call list. I had it up and then I didn't. So sorry. Give me 1 second. Okay. Ronnie.
Aye.
Kaylin.
Aye.
Karen.
Aye.
Connie.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thanks for that. moment of patience. And next on our agenda, we will start with old business, 7.1. Overview of invitation for bids, IFB for manufactured units at Walnut Lane. This item is, we've got a briefing and possible action, and Caitlin is here with us tonight to take us through your items in the packet and request what you need from us.
Great. Well, to kind of organize our conversation, I created a little PowerPoint that I just finished as you were approving minutes. So bear with me on that. It's not my most beautiful presentation I've ever made, but let me share.
You shared yourselves. There we go. It looks great.
Okay. So this presentation is to give you guys an overview of the invitation for bids that we posted in mid-September. So we posted this, and the last time we talked about this as a council, I kind of posed it to you as, you know, we're at this decision point, and we just wanted to do an exploration of what was available to this project, you know, kind of to figure out how to proceed as quickly as we could to replace some of the units out at Walnut Lane that need a lot of maintenance work. So just briefly to go through, you know, the bids that we got and kind of how we got to this decision that I presented in the packet. We received 9 bids to the invitation for bids. 6 of those were for manufactured units with 4 bidders using Fleetwood Homes and 2 bidders using Champion Homes. And then we had 3 modular bids, all kind of smaller scale, 2 of which have their own factories, and then 1 of them would have partnered with a third party factory to build their units that's located in Reno, Nevada. So, you know, just briefly going through the review criteria was posted in the packet. And so this was just to kind of give you guys a glimpse of our review process, where all of the bids shook out. As you can see, I kind of divided it into modular bids and manufactured bids. For modular bids, IndieDwell shook out on top, and then for manufactured bids, Factory Homes Outlet was the top bid for those. But because you know, manufactured and modular units, you know, and also kind of to back up to that, just as a reminder, the reason why we're separating these out is the manufactured bids we talked about, because they would not be permanent structures. We would be able to sell those off and replace those, whereas modular housing is built and placed on a foundation, so those would be permanent. So we separated those out because I feel like they are, even in terms of infrastructure work, but also the quality of the units and the purpose of the units, it's apples to oranges. So that's kind of the context of how we reviewed these bids. So as we were going through and requesting additional information, you know, checking references, reviewing bids, talking through them, a lot of things came up in this review process. The biggest of which is that we found out that there's a lot of uncertainty generally within the construction industry right now, but also within the factories that are producing these manufactured homes, more specifically, but also kind of across the, you know, wood construction industry. So specifically with the factories, and especially the bigger factories with Fleetwood Homes and Champion Homes, they, both the bidders and sales reps for those factories communicated that because of, you know, COVID, them having to shut down their factories and also now operating with smaller labor pool, lumber shortages, supply chain challenges, you know, because everyone's affected by COVID, lumber is being affected by the wildfires and tariffs and all kinds of things. So we found out that there's a lot of uncertainty with these bids, which had an impact to cost and timeline. And so I asked all of the bidders to provide a little bit more information about whether they could, guarantee us, if we went to contract, if they could guarantee us a timeline to get these bids and to get a cost, and if they would be interested or not interested in, but would be willing to sign a liquidated damages clause just to ensure a little bit of certainty to make sure that once we sign a contract, we'd be able to kind of proceed as we intended. And some of the bidders weren't interested in that. And generally the factories communicated to us that if we were to sign a contract right now, we wouldn't be able to get into their factory line for them to start producing our units until spring of 2021. I had a couple of bidders tell me earlier dates on the manufactured side. Generally, I'm not sure how much to trust that because I've talked to multiple sales reps for the factory. So because of especially the impacts to timeline, as a committee, we started talking about, the benefit of going with manufactured housing units was that we wanted to get them in the winter so that we could replace units out there as quickly as we could. So because the timeline in particular was so much more competitive than we anticipated between manufactured and modular, we kind of came to this decision of, why not just start with phase one of this process and dive right into modular. And that way we would avoid, kind of this idea that we were talking about at the last meeting about not having to buy manufactured units and having to sell them in 5 years and replace them with permanent housing and losing some of that value. So we considered the modular bids a lot more than we thought we would from the onset of this. So, as we were looking at the modular bids, as I showed you earlier, Individual was the highest ranked, and because they are the only one of 9 bids that uses steel frame construction, we kind of felt like, and we were really impressed with their bid and their team and their company. We just felt like it would be the best fit. So, I am coming to you kind of with my committee behind me, and I guess I should, I didn't include a slide about this, but on my committee, I had Mayor Emily. Thank you for participating in that. In addition to myself, Barry, who's our building inspector, Chuck, Corey, Nora, and we had Joel and Carly kind of in the periphery, and Clint. So thank you guys. I know that it was a lot going through all these bids. So we as a committee are kind of bringing this bid to you as a recommended selection for moving forward, especially moving forward with phase one of implementing this master plan that we've been working on with Architectural Squared. And I'll have more information about that, how this fits into the bigger picture. But like I said, they're the highest scoring bid. They have a factory located in Pueblo, Colorado. So while it wasn't one of the closer bids, it's still within our region. We feel really certain and really confident moving forward with this. And we think that both this bid and this company meet the goals that and the priorities that we talked about earlier this year that you guys set for this project. So just really briefly about Individual as a company, they are a certified B Corporation. And so they hold themselves to a higher standard, and they've communicated since the beginning that, they're not just looking for any kind of project. They really look for partnerships with organizations and projects that fit their mission, which is, basically to revolutionize the building industry and focus on housing that is healthy and sustainable and durable and good for people and for the planet. So I think in general, as a company, they're really interesting. They kind of put their name on the map because they started with shipping container housing and have kind of dived more into just general steel frame construction since then. But they're established in 2017, didn't start building until 2018, but they've kind of exploded, and they have done a lot of projects in our region and all the way to LA and to Virginia on the West and East Coast. So they're growing really quickly as a company. And with their proposal that they sent us, they are proposing, they tailored, rather than giving us bids for all of their units, they tailored their response specifically to what they heard myself and our committee communicating about what we envision for this part of the site in that southeast corner. So their proposal is for 8 units, which is 4 duplex units, kind of 2 stacked on top of each other with an ADA unit on the bottom and a standard unit on the top. 2 bedroom, 2 bath, full kitchen, 672 square feet. They are net zero ready, which means that if someday we wanted to put a solar panel on them, especially with the shed roof design, we would be able to make them fully net zero. Their timeline, and I know that Ronnie had a question about this and I didn't get to answer your email about it, but their timeline is to complete and have the units ready by the end of April 2021 for a contract amount of just over $1 million. So going a little bit into, how this fits into the bigger picture of the Architectural Squared. I got our team to kind of update our phasing plan and our master plan based on these units. And so this is what they sent me to kind of reflect that change. So on the initial master plan that they proposed, and I apologize, I don't have this in here, but we have always been talking about doing duplexes on that southeastern corner. And I know that this is kind of small for you guys. It's the easiest way I could do it. So we initially talked about doing, I believe, 6 duplexes right here. So now we're able to, because these units are a little bit smaller and they're stacked, the way that they are, we'll be able to do 4 in this first corner. And then in a second phase, we'll continue to do modular if the council decides to go that route. And we'll do 10 additional units, kind of working our way back. So I anticipate we'd be able to do that in the next 6 months to a year. Kind of once we get this first phase done, we'll keep going around and then we'll do apartments at a later date. So in total, still hitting, I believe this is for 81 units, but still hitting that 80 unit mark. So talking more specifically about the timeline for this bid, this is the timeline from their contract. So, if we issued a contract this week, all of these dates would be pushed back a little bit, but the long of the short of it is that, they would start shipping units to Moab to go on the site and start setting and stitching them to the site beginning of March. And then it would be 30 days from when they sent the units here for them to be kind of interiors, exteriors, setting on the site, everything to be done. So build time from start to finish should be done by end of April for units. So we would be able to have new tenants moving in sometime in May. I think this timeline would work really well on our end because we have a lot of logistics to figure out before we can start getting units on the site. Kind of mostly including cleaning up the site to make sure that they're ready for it and putting in the necessary infrastructure for these units. We have, looking at this plan, so we have 2 units on the site right now. This one, I don't know if you can see it very well, but this one unit in red, kind of in the middle of these duplexes, is vacant. And then we have one in the very southeast corner that is occupied. And I've already notified those tenants that we are planning on doing this and that, we'll need to figure out a way to relocate them for a couple months. And then they will be one of the first people to move into these new units. So we'll have to do some logistical preparation for that as well. So looking at the budget, the units up at the top, all of that information is pulled from the bid. And I know that I sent you guys a pro forma this afternoon. I talked to Indy Dwell again this afternoon and had to clarify a couple of things to make sure that these were correct. So this has changed a little bit. This total number has gone up by about $48,000, and that was my error in kind of the pro forma that I sent you guys earlier. But so these units would be set in the contract minus plans and permits. I got this number from Barry. And then the infrastructure down at the bottom, these are all estimates that Barry, myself, and Chuck, and James Green, who's set engineering's civil engineer, who's on our architectural square team. These are all kind of our best guess about, how much the infrastructure for this project is going to cost. And so, kind of bottom line for this scope of work, it would be about $1.5 million. And, talking to some local builders in town, we've heard that about 200 a square foot, 180 to 200 is about what residential construction is going for right now. So I think, just looking at the housing prices, I think that we're still a little bit higher, but I think that for the quality of the units, we're right on target with what construction looks like here. And I think that we know that there's going to be a lot of infrastructure work and costs associated with that. So keep that in mind as you're looking at those numbers. And then looking at full build out, how this fits into the bigger scope with architectural squared. We're looking right now at, if we're doing 81 units, we're looking at about 14 million, 14.3, maybe closer to 14.5 for a total build out of this project over all of the phases. And so Sheik has gotten me some, rough numbers, and we've been in conversations with Zions Bank already about getting some loan for this. So I think that, we still have work to do. I still have some work to do to figure out some other equity that we can bring to this project other than Zions Bank loans, but I feel confident that we can do that. So kind of just moving forward, kind of the last big thing is looking at the pro forma. This is just a really rough, kind of as we're starting to talk about the cash flow with this project. I think that we will need to find a little bit more equity to invest in this project on the front end. But after 10 years, this project will start to cash flow. So I think that, I think that's pretty common with affordable housing projects, is that it takes a couple of years. I think the council could consider a couple of options with this project, including subdividing some of these lots off in later phases. So, as we're going into the second phase, subdividing some of those modular units, we could potentially subdivide those off and sell those, and then that would be able to help us pay off our debt more quickly. We've looked at a few different scenarios about that, but I don't have any solid numbers for you on that because I think that that's still in a later phase of the project. So kind of just, that's the brief overview. I have a couple of pocket slides, including some renderings from Architectural Square, just some really rough Revit renderings about kind of what this would look like as it builds out. And I think, if the council decides to, I think that the council has a couple of options of, proceeding with modular or kind of proceeding with manufactured. And I have a little bit more information about manufactured if the council is interested in that. But otherwise, I'm happy to answer questions and have the motion here for you when you're ready.
Well, thanks for having that motion on the screen. We do have that in our packets in the agenda summary. And so I'd actually, like to move to this. Because our meeting is quite full today, and because I'm curious if any council member is really feeling passionately in one way or another, I will entertain a motion at this time to kick off the conversation. But I also, want to give some Q&A time between the council and Caitlin. So motion or council questions or comments. Caitlin.
I move to direct staff to bring us more information regarding the specific additional equity needs and how that would fit into the city budget.
Thank you for that motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Tawny, for the second. Discussion. I feel like that motion is quite responsible, but I'm curious to hear from Caitlin how that fits within the timeline.
I think specifically with this bid, I feel a little bit more certain about waiting, but I think if the council wants to do, I think there's a lot of uncertainty with, wood frame construction right now, both for modular and for manufactured. And so I don't know for those specific bids what kind of numbers will change between now and when the council makes a decision. So I'm happy to have a conversation about additional equity needs for this project, but I think it just partially depends on how long it takes for us to figure that out and whether that will change some of the numbers of the bids.
Well, we are in the land of special meetings at this point because we have one regular meeting for November and one regular meeting for December that is ahead of us. And so what is your timeline for, responding to that? And it looks like, Joel, you have a question. You want to speak to this?
Yeah, we met with Zions Bank a while back and we went through all of our financials. The numbers we're giving you are based off of what Zions through our budgeting process and what we can do, what we can actually afford going forward over that 25 years. And so the question I guess I have for you is, do you prefer us to just bring you back that information, or would you like for us to arrange for Alex or a member of Zion's team to kind of give you the same presentation and the information we provided them so you can see what exactly we're looking at?
Kaylin?
Yes, I'd like to see that, but if I'm understanding it correctly, the city is going to have to put forth $1.5 million now, plus potentially several million additional, and we have quite a few other infrastructure needs. And so I feel like in order for us to prioritize, we need that information, and I prefer to have a chance to digest it rather than, and also just to be sure that you've done quality control, because this was sent to us just hours before this meeting, and just want to make sure that we've got it buttoned down and we're clear what our priorities are.
Connie?
I just, I want a little bit more information, and I want to see how it fits into the budget overall with everything else that we're dealing with. I still think this is a worthwhile project, and in the end, it will be good for a lot of people. It's just, I get so sick of saying the word COVID. I want a new word for it. I think it's affected everything, and I want to make sure that we're doing our fiduciary responsibility as far as to the city. And yet I understand that there's a deadline that we have to work with, and we were adamant that we didn't want to displace and cause more chaos and create problems while we were trying to solve them. And I feel like we've hit some speed bumps with this, but we also have to make sure that we're doing everything that we are supposed to do. So I'd like to see the information from Zion's Bank and just see how it fits in our overall budget and how we can, I need to put in layman's terms, I'm not a banker or an economist. I just need to know how we can make it work.
And we can provide that for you guys. We can reach out to Alex. We can get something to be brought for you guys. And, I think that, like Kaylin said, we got to figure out how this fits into our budget. We have a lot of projects, and you guys know the situation with our infrastructure at this point. It's just a matter of prioritizing what we're spending it on, because we obviously can't afford all of it. And Tanya, I think that you hit it on the head as well when you said that we've hit a lot of road bumps with this, but I think that all things considered, with the financial situation the city's been in, with not displacing anyone, with moving the project forward, I'm really impressed with where we're at with all of the hurdles that we have had. getting into this project. The fact that we're here and we're getting close to being able to like have Zion show you the financials and our information and get you that, you know, under these situations, if we prioritize this project, we can afford to do it in this way. I'm really impressed that we're actually where we're at with this project, with all things considered. I think Caitlin and staff and Barry and everyone's done a great job just to even get it to this moment. So
could we be prepared by October 27th, which is our next meeting? That's 2 weeks away, with deeper financial information, Clint, and then have Alex join us? And that would just set us back 2 weeks. Karen?
Let's put something together and jointly present it.
Okay. Karen?
So I'm curious, $1.5 million is what we would have to come up with, or 1.4, whatever it is. How much do we have in the Wahoo account?
about that.
How much has been spent on Architectural Squared? How does it change the dynamic of that contract that we have with them? Because this is a whole new game. How many people are living in trailers that are inhabitable? And I mean, is 8 enough? I mean, we're not going to hit our goal of getting them out by winter. So what is that? What's the repercussions for us over this as being landlords over the winter time in the next coming, months? I'm just kind of curious that, yeah, it's a lot of information. And like, is Architectural Squared's numbers part of coming out of Wahoo? Is that?
Yeah, so I'll try and answer all of those. So first of all, Architectural Squared's contract is being paid out of the Wahoo. In addition to all of the maintenance work that we're doing out there, and the new maintenance person that we hired. I guess also to provide a couple of updates. We have hired a full-time maintenance person, and he is scheduled to start next Monday. So we're really excited about that. Additionally, Kelly and Bonnie have been working really hard to renovate one of our existing trailers. And between labor and all of the supplies for that, that costs about $11 million to renovate that that
Wait,
what? Sorry, $11,000.
Yeah, 11,000, excuse me, yeah.
$11,000, I'm so sorry.
It's a nice trailer, 11 million.
Yeah, I'm so used to saying million right now. $11,000, but that tenant moved in today, so that's really exciting. All really good news. But yeah, so Architectural Squared is coming out of the Wahoo, and I got caught up on the million thing.
I think one question was kind of number of residents,
Right.
there now and in need, or yeah.
Yeah, so we have 27 trailers that are still occupied out there. And, that's going to be one of the first tasks that our new maintenance person starts doing out there, is doing like a real inventory of, and starting to figure out the priorities, how to prioritize all of those units.
And we're happy to set up a field trip council meeting where we all go down there and you guys can see firsthand what we're talking about.
Yeah, I would love to bring you out there.
I would love to do that.
Yeah. If I may second, Karen asked great questions. I had much the same questions. In part, to put it another way, I thought A Squared was doing a master plan, and custom buildings to be built from drawings that they would produce out of that master plan. And then all of a sudden, for different reasons, first there was manufactured homes, and then there was modular homes, now kind of a separate tack, and all of a sudden we're leapfrogging over. So I'm just not quite clear to me, as Karen is not clear either, exactly how the remainder of A Squared's work fits in here, and are we throwing a bunch of money away by jumping ahead?
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that question back, because I did want to address that. So this is all within the scope of work for Architectural Squared. So we have a contract with them specifically for doing a master plan and figuring out all the pre-development and helping us with financing And all of this stuff that we're working on right now, we don't have a contract with them to design the specific units. That would be a separate contract no matter what we do. And even with, the specific infrastructure for this phase, if we did decide to proceed with modular, that would be separate from our contract with Architectural Squared. So we're just, all of this right now, all of the material that I presented today, that is within the scope with Architectural Squared. I think the only thing that's a little bit different is the timeline. I think that when we first signed this contract with Architectural Squared, we thought that we would do the master plan and then start phase one. And instead we're talking about doing phase one and the master plan at the same time. And with talking with Corey and Nora, we've had conversations about with this site plan about doing a phasing agreement, which is something that they've done with a number of developments. And so, that still falls within all of the work that we're doing to develop this site plan for this project. So, yeah.
The contract with Architectural Squared would still be in place. They would still do what they're obligated to do. Basically, as we've got into this deeper, the trailers are in the situation that they're in. We went out and got additional information to give back to our Architectural Squared and say, if we want to go this route, this is what these cost, this is a way we can do that. How would you guys then take this and give us the product that we're asking for?
Yes.
Do you have any problem outright fronting the money? I mean, we're kind of broke, and if the Wahoo fund is running dry, how are you going to pay the $1.5 million?
So we have, go ahead, Caitlin.
Well, just kind of what Joel was saying earlier. So we do have the Wahoo, which will cover, a decent portion of this. And then also we've been having conversations with Zions Bank about, financing.
So the Wahoo, the 1.5 million in the Wahoo now would go towards this offset. And then once we start doing financing for the project as a whole, we would then get that back through the financing process and we could put it back in. The Wahoo is running out of money. The Wahoo is reimbursed through overnight accommodations. We have not permitted a new overnight accommodation in Moab City since February of 2019. And this keeps getting lost in the discussion collectively throughout the community because everyone is seeing all these hotels get built. Like we're still building hotels. All of those hotels were permitted almost 2 years ago. It just takes 2 years to build out what was in the pipeline. So what everyone's seeing going in around town, those hotels are all 2 years old. Nothing has been permitted since February 2019. So we basically are not receiving any new Wahoo monies. And right now we don't have overnight accommodations in the city limits. We're not going to anytime soon. And so we're not getting any new money into that. So the fund is what the fund is at this point. We have one hotel that was vested prior to February 2019 that still hasn't broke ground. There's one more that still could potentially be built out of the 2-year-old packet. So there's one more lump that could still come, but that's it. After that, without putting overnight accommodations back into place, there's no more money coming into the Wahoo.
It's probably worth it for us to realize that for 8 units at 1.5 million, that's a cost per unit of what did I just have up here? 187,000 per unit. And I know that I'm not including the cost of land, but that's going to be distributed over, the total number of units. And so I think what Caitlin, I think the motion that's on the table is very responsible and gives the council enough time to be able to do this. But I do encourage Caitlin for, speed with which to get this information. Let's make sure that we're looking it over. And then, and I do think that meetings with council members so that we can each have a clearer idea of what it's going to cost even before we have that meeting is going to be really important. And I did have one question regarding the numbers that you had put up. I saw street improvement was like 230 something. Is that the paving of Walnut Lane from the intersection, or is that just the street section within the development?
That's just curb, gutter, and sidewalk, and tearing up the road and rebuilding the road for this specific scope. And so I got that information from Chuck this morning.
So there's still a heavy lift of infrastructure because we are, as the developer, going to be required to redo Walnut Lane, correct? Okay. Karen?
I'm just curious, Clint, do you know offhand how much is in the Wahoo account?
1.633 million.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further comments before I call for a vote? Okay. Gosh, I'm so sorry. Give me just 1 second. Ronnie.
Aye.
Tawny.
Aye.
Karen.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Kaylin.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Good work. Moving on, we are now at old business 7.2. Update on progress of the Arches Hotspot Region Coordinating Committee. This is just a discussion item, but Carly wanted to put some information in front of us, and I do believe we have Chuck, our city engineer, as well. So Assistant City Manager Carly, take it away.
Hey, thank you guys. Good evening, council. I'm going to share my screen. Just I put together a quick little presentation for you. I'm bringing this to you because, let's see if I can get this to start. Because next week, the Arches Hotspot Coordinating Committee is going to be meeting on Wednesday to kind of put forward a draft concept package that will then, the next week after that, be before you and the county commission in a joint meeting for your approval to send to UDOT. So also we should probably talk about scheduling that meeting, maybe this evening briefly after I'm done with the presentation. And I hope this discussion sort of brings the council members who are not on that committee up to speed, and it'll help foster some consensus and just give those committee members the confidence to move forward and make a decision next week. So what I'm going to do is just do a brief overview of the final 3 projects that have come into focus through this process. And we'll start with the big one, the Off Main Street and Dispersed Parking Project. So we've discussed this in the past when it was first identified for further development near the beginning of this process. It's a complete streets parking scheme on between 7 to 9 city streets with the intent of drawing parking off of Main Street and thereby eliminating or helping mitigate congestion. Chuck and his engineering team have put together a concept level design to establish feasibility of this project, and that's what was included in your packet. And he's also done a cost estimate for several different scenarios that seek to achieve some measure of the complete streets vision. And we'll discuss the cost estimates in a minute, but I just want to clarify that if this project is ultimately selected by the Transportation Commission, an engineering and design firm would be contracted to develop final design, to do public engagement, and to do landscape design and those kinds of details. So this is really a high level design at this moment. And just sort of bottom line on what Chuck has discovered through his concept development is that we can achieve or get about 109 to 188 parking stalls downtown, depending on which scenario we select. And when it comes to cost estimates, there are 2 numbers that I want to talk about before I delve into the next slide. One of them is $36,000, and that is a price per stall. It might ring a bell because it was the price per stall for the downtown parking structure. And at this time, the guidance we're getting from UDOT is their preference is we don't exceed that price per stall amount, because it was such a point of contention the first time around. So they feel that that's an accurate benchmark to sort of evaluate the cost effectiveness of these different scenarios. Another important number is 6%. That is because that is at this time, according to UDOT, the maximum amount of project costs that they will devote to aesthetics for the development of aesthetics for this dispersed parking project. That was the same number they used for the downtown parking structure as well. So you can look at this table that Chuck put together, and you can see several different scenarios here: a stamped concrete downtown, regular concrete downtown, and asphalt. Asphalt being the least expensive and stamped concrete being the most expensive. It also includes the consideration of Emmett Boulevard, which is a really great project because it's inexpensive. The cost per stall is $11,000. So it drives our cost per stall down, and we also get a whole 44 stalls for just that project. So what the Arches Hotspot Committee did last week is they sort of settled on or recommended a range that they would be putting forward to UDOT. So it's sort of a soft recommendation at this point. Instead of trying to nail down a specific how many stamped concrete, how many regular concrete, how many asphalt, instead of asking all those kinds of questions, we would be waiting till design to nail down those specifics and have a consultant on board to help guide that determination. But instead, we're going to do a range which was similar to when the downtown parking structure was selected. If you recall, there was a budget and then a certain amount of parking stalls we had to achieve and where they had to be achieved. So we're right now proposing 153 to 188 stalls. Price range of about $31,000 to $38,000 per stall. At the time last week, we were talking about some sort of combination of at least concrete and asphalt. And we can talk about the stamped concrete a little bit later. This would require Emmett Boulevard to be developed as part of it, as part of the off Main Street parking. And the project total amount would be $4.8 to $7.2 million. There was an important development after our Wednesday meeting. We received an email from UDOT on Thursday evening explaining and finally kind of answering some questions we had about the 6% aesthetic cost. We understood that only 6% would be aesthetic, but we didn't understand what is considered an aesthetic. It was really hard to get any sort of definition from UDOT. And they finally came to us with an answer, and their response is that anything above asphalt, so this down here, would be considered an aesthetic. And they would only pay for up to 6% of project costs for anything above asphalt, meaning concrete and stamped concrete. This was a surprise. I think we were hoping concrete would be part of, would be considered functional from an engineering standpoint, not just purely aesthetic. But this is the answer we've gotten from UDOT for now. They're also still determining what baseline lighting will cost. Part of you probably noticed in the cost estimates in the packet, lighting is a huge cost because we have to increase lighting for pedestrian safety. And that kind of lighting is expensive. So if we want anything beyond just baseline, like a decorative lighting, it will be expensive, and it would have to be put into the 6% aesthetic bin. So in other words, if the committee and the council and the Grand County Commission are interested in concrete downtown and decorative lighting and all of those kinds of things, they're going to be expensive and will likely exceed 6%. So either a couple things need to happen if that's something that's still desired. Either the local community has to decide how to make that happen. We fund it locally here, or we make a case to UDOT explaining why we think the aesthetic costs aren't just purely aesthetic, they are functional as well, which I think there is a compelling discussion that we can have regarding that. Also, Karen, Kaylin, and Mike, feel free to jump in at any time because you guys are more part of this discussion than I am, but I hope I'm accurately representing that. So this is like the asphalt scenario. It's a lot less money, 3.5 million to 5.4 million would be the most, but that's just been a significant shift, or I guess it's an answer we weren't necessarily expecting. I think we were thinking concrete could be something we could get as part of outside of the 6% aesthetic costs. So any questions about that? No. Okay. I'm not. Oh, sorry, Ronnie. I didn't see you.
I mean, I don't know if you want this question now, but obviously in the packet, you had information about the cost of asphalt versus concrete over time. And
Yes.
it looked like, because obviously the city will take up the maintenance cost. So it seemed like asphalt had a maintenance cost associated with it. I didn't see one for the forms of concrete. So yeah, my basic question had been, it seemed like the amount of money that it would cost you in maintenance was still, let me see, sorry, I'm a little bit dyslexic. I think it was less than the overall savings of doing asphalt versus concrete. However, I'm assuming that the upfront costs are paid by the hotspot funding, right? So it's really kind of more a question of what will the city in the end have? And it seems like we will have annual maintenance costs with asphalt, but not with concrete, or at least not much.
No, yeah, that's a really good question. I do put at the end, we have kind of a little summary about what we can expect, but I can also try to pull up. It's a good question to answer now. Sorry, I've got a tickle in my throat. So there is maintenance associated with all three scenarios, all types. The biggest cost is electricity for lighting. And then about 10,000 for, so I think that was, we priced that out about 40,000, 10,000 for just general O&M improvements. And then asphalt was a little more expensive. I think it was like $7,000 more expensive than the other two, because we'd have to restripe every year or every 2 years. And that comes with a cost. So that's why the asphalt is surprisingly more expensive for us to maintain than the other two options. And Chuck can speak more to, obviously, O&M, he's on it. So if there are no more questions about disperse, well, I'll kind of go back. I guess the takeaway for this is at some point we need to make a decision if you want asphalt, if asphalt is what you get, is that something that you're happy with? And we just try to move on from there, maybe improving the project through local funds some other way. And so I think that's sort of the big question that the committee and this council has to grapple with. Because it is a different vision than we were thinking when we were developing this.
Do you want us to have that conversation right now? Is that something that we need to think about over the course of between now and the Sun Court meeting tomorrow?
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning that. I meant to say it's actually at Moonstone Gallery, the open house, not Sun Court.
I'm sorry.
But so, I mean, I think the discussion would be nice to have now because it's all fresh on your minds. And it is sort of the biggest unknown, like the messiest one, I would say, of the three projects. And I'm sure that the folks on the Arches Hotspot Committee would like to know your thoughts as we go into their meeting next Wednesday. So, yeah, Ronnie.
Well, maybe the folks on the committee can explain to me. I guess I've been confused from what I've been reading in the packets and when I did the survey online, which I understand is open till the end of this week. Since there are three projects identified, it wasn't clear to me at this point if the survey results were going to help play a significant role in driving choosing one of those projects or one or more, depending on cost. So I guess I need a little bit of an explanation on how that works from here.
So like the three projects together, is that what you mean?
Yeah, it's just been unclear to me from everything I've read. If the idea is to go to UDOT and say we want all three of these, or to choose between now and when the committee goes to UDOT to say, oh, we've decided we want this one versus that one. It's just been unclear to me as a member of the public reading stuff how that works.
That's a really good question. I think my impression is that all three will be probably recommended at some level, and then they will be prioritized. So the committee will vote to prioritize them.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, sorry, Mike.
Yeah, Ronnie, if I may throw in, those of us who would like to do a pilot transit program, we're caught in a bind here, right? Because we'd love to do the transit program, which means we have to spend less money somewhere else. And we would love to put in stamped concrete and lots of trees and all that good stuff, but it costs money that we really can't afford. So we're caught between a rock and a hard place. So that's part of the reason for the ambiguity, Ronnie.
Yeah.
And then Ronnie, part of my understanding is that as of last week, we are really trying to present all three projects and say, okay, hey, we feel like we could do, like if we're at from 5 million to 7 million for side street parking, and then we have $1.5 million for 3 years of transit, and then we have $3 million to do the multimodal path. It seems like the intent is to show all three projects and present those as if that's what we are wanting to get for the $10 million.
Okay, I guess my one comment then would be from the input that I saw from the public, I kind of got the impression they wouldn't like the parking unless we really were doing a complete street thing. If it's just going to be pavement and maybe some really basic lights, I'm pretty sure from what I read, that wouldn't be very popular. So I guess the information I would need, and I assume some other people would need, is what if any other money, since it's been suggested that the city, come up with the rest of it for the aesthetics, how realistic is that? Because otherwise I'm thinking it's not something the majority of people want, but that's just my 2 cents I'm going to throw out there.
Yeah. And so if Carly, do you want to go ahead?
No, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say, so the asphalt discussion just came up last week. I mean, we were still trying to, get the whole shebang with lighting and outdoor furniture or whatever, the bollards or whatever, that decorative lighting. So there is still the possibility, if I inferred this correctly, that we still have 6%. So we're going to have $300,000 to still buy trees. I mean, like, trees are like one of the most important aspects that I think the committee has been really pushing, because shade and creating those spaces to slow traffic down. So the complete streets, again, like what Carly was saying, I mean, I really do feel like we as a committee have to have our own argument or discussion, as Carly said, as to why we really do feel that the complete street idea is something very worthwhile to UDOT, and it is not aesthetics. It has to do with safety, and it has to do with the appeal of getting people off of Main Street. I mean, there are so many studies that show, the effectiveness of a complete street model. I mean, I really do think we need to still present that, our case as to the commission as to why we really feel strongly about it, through economic development, through safety, through us achieving a multimodality in our downtown. So, I mean, I'm very firm in trying to still, make that happen. But can we have asphalt and trees? I mean, I think we can still do that as well. I mean, it's not as ideal. It doesn't differentiate, a highway compared to a side street, but I don't know, because I haven't seen designs with an asphalt treatment compared to a concrete treatment.
Okay, well, I'll wait to hear more. It was just kind of a red flag for me, because when we had the parking structure, we kind of came up with 6%, but then as the discussions went on longer, it was like, oh, it's going to be more expensive and we may not have money for that. So I was nervous, but I'm going to let the conversation play out. I'll just follow.
Yeah, Ronnie, if I may add, I'm nervous too, all right, because it's a basic conflict here, because UDOT wants to relieve congestion. They want us to do it cheap. And the residents in the survey said, oh, we're interested in an aesthetically beautiful downtown area with lots of trees and slow traffic and all that kind of good stuff. So we're trying to come to compromises here. Karen's trying to additionally talk them into violating their own rules in hopes that we'll convince them that this is the right thing for the town and therefore the right thing for them. Whether or not we'll be successful or not remains to be seen.
And just a quick clarification, the downtown parking structure parking stall amounts were at $46,000 a stall.
Oh, they were 40, I thought it was 36.
No, at 188 at 8.3 million.
188, okay. Oh, great.
I think we even had one meeting early on where they were 50 something.
Yes, they varied widely. And so, yeah, that's good news. We're in the range no matter what. So it's with that recommendation.
So Carly, are we, so this is just the dispersed parking. Were you going to talk about the other two options at tonight's meeting?
Mm-hmm.
It seems like the other two are less in need of discussion with this council.
That is true, except one that I did want to alert them about is just about the transit and our obligations in years 4 and 5. And we can kind of skip really quickly to it
Before we do, I'd like to weigh in with just a couple comments about this. So Karen, as I've told you, I'm definitely willing to, do what I can to help tell our story to the commission, because I do think that when we're talking about the aesthetics of a parking structure versus the aesthetics of dispersed parking, they're different, and the percentage of what you get to spend, it's reasonable to say, the aesthetics have a different impact. And I just want to say too that it would be crushing to think, oh, well, we're going to spend money on this bike lane that may or may not actually decongest our downtown, as opposed to spending additional money to make, to make areas where we're trying to develop parking so attractive that we in Moab would want to park on the side streets as opposed to busy parallel parking downtown. So like, I'm all for the aesthetics. And I know I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again. I would love for UDOT to kick in some of the cash to pay for our 2-hour parking on Main Street. That signage, I mean, that is a way to decongest Main Street. And that's something that businesses on Main Street have been asking for. They don't want an RV parked in front of their business all day long. So I just, I want to offer my help to tell our story. I think it's worth, continuing to ask. And the final thought is that if all we get is, bare bones for these parking areas, then we in Moab do need to foot the bill to add the aesthetics that we want. Utah Department of Transportation, UDOT, did not give us money to plant the trees that are on Main Street right now. We did that. We spent our money and we did that. And so we just have to be, willing and ready. If we can't leverage this aesthetic that I just would hate to throw the baby out with the bathwater and feel like this is a failure project if we don't get right away a bunch of trees and pretty lights and attractive bulbs coming off of Main Street. I think if we don't get that, we continue to work toward that. And that's what we message to our community. And we make sure that residents know that that's what we're working on and that we heard them through the survey. That's all I wanted to share on that. Carly, go ahead and take us through the last two options.
So really quickly, just talking about the transit shuttle pilot. This would be basically like what has happened is UDOT has engaged Fair and Purist to develop basically like a technical memorandum for us that we would submit to UDOT and to the Transportation Commission. They're evaluating a hotel hopper and a local valley loop. Very exciting. It would cost $500,000 per year for the first 3 years, and UDOT would cover that out of the hotspot funds. And the local community, us in Grand County, would be responsible for years 4 and 5. So we're looking at about $1 million. Lots of ways to get that. And we can talk more about it if you have questions. We can do it through grants, finding other revenue sources, sharing with the county and their TRT. I know Karen has been doing a lot of research into this. And then real briefly, there's also the Spanish Valley Trail, which is has been in development for several years. It would be run through Spanish Valley Drive using a side path option, multimodal transportation. The cost is expensive for the entire length of the trail at about 4.2 in today's dollars. So the committee is exploring maybe doing half or doing most or doing all, those kinds of different options. This project has met a lot of scrutiny from UDOT. What I'm hearing from them is they don't feel like it achieves their congestion problem. And that's such an important part of the hotspot funding. So even if we submit, say, all three, the Spanish Valley Trail, transit, and dispersed parking, UDOT might, instead say we're taking Spanish Valley Trail out and the other two go forward to the Transportation Commission or any other combination of that. So, and just really quickly to wrap up, I wanted to sort of clarify or make it clear that what we as a city would be committing to if all of this sort of played out. So there's $50,000 to $85,000 per year for ongoing O&M at the off Main Street parking. We would have to kick in $300,000 for Emma Boulevard, which was identified the first go around. UDOT would not be waiving that or covering it with the current hotspot costs. And of course, any aesthetics, however those are defined at the end of the day, above 6% would be ours if we chose to a project that had those costs. And with the transit shuttle, we'd have to find a way to find about $1 million for years 4 and 5. They've asked about land for and construction of a bus barn, but that's really preliminary. I'm just sort of giving you a heads up. And we'll likely need to enter into an interlocal agreement with Grand County really quickly after this to identify project costs, responsibilities, who would be holding the contract for the transit shuttle, all those kinds of details. So just letting you know of the effort ahead if it's selected.
Can I ask, since while the original funds were going to be a parking structure in the city, it was made clear to us that the county is like, this is our project too, now that we're not doing the parking structure. And so what are the conversations about, sharing costs? So if we're looking at $1 million for year 4 and 5, and I'm grateful to see interlocal agreement in there, are we thinking we split the cost of the transit shuttle with them? Is that the feeling that we're getting from members on the committee?
Just from the chair, yes, absolutely. And just to be super clear, when I spoke with UDOT, so there is rural transportation funding that we need to start applying for. So, and it's a 50% match. So the cost, and this is just an estimate, that it's about $500,000 a year to have transit. So they've come up with that we're going to have to fund it for years 4 and 5. And it's going to take us 3 years to get the funding from UDOT, but there is funding for a 50% match for transit funding. Right now, Park City is getting all the funding and they really don't qualify for a rural community, but nobody else has been applying for it. And so we have a darn good chance to get the 50% funding. So it'd be probably $500,000 per year in 4 and 5. That would have to be split between the county and the city.
Okay. Thanks.
And yeah, and then there's the TRT money that we could use towards transit, which was allowed in the legislative changes last year.
Are we thinking about like forming a transit authority down here, the way Park City did up there?
There's
Because then
there's,
funding too. This was something.
Yeah.
we're gonna
Yep.
jump
I mean, if we got to get through these first hurdles, and there's so many discussions that have to happen. This is just like an opportunity to get something off the ground fairly quickly with this grant money.
Amazing. So what else? What else, Carly?
That is all I have.
Okay.
Any other questions or?
I want to get a commitment from sooner rather than later from the county council about splitting that bill. I mean, I hear what you're saying, Karen, but that's probably a good conversation to have right up front.
I think that's what we're going to try to do at our joint meeting. Is my impression.
Great. All right. So what do we need? Do you need direction from us, or was this the goal? Have we achieved the goal of this agenda item in going through all of this information?
Yes, if Karen, Kaylin, and Mike feel like they've gotten what they need, and Tani and Ronnie are feeling informed, I would say yes, that was the intent. So everyone feels on board and up to speed and comfortable with the direction we're going.
Yeah, Mayor, I'm going to be intensely interested as to what the public reaction is at the next thing. We did have one session, but not many people attended. And a lot of people really haven't tuned into this yet. And there has been some sentiment, as you say, for aesthetics rather than lots of parking spaces. So how this will play out remains to be seen. But I'm hoping for more. Those of you out there watching this on YouTube, come watch and vote, okay?
All right, let's move on. We are now at moving on to new business. And Carly, thank you. That was a lot of work and a lot of really good work. Thank you. And Chuck, thanks for sticking around for that. New business, 8.1, off-highway vehicle, OHV, noise mitigation options. This is a discussion and request for direction. We've got our city attorney with us tonight, as well as our police chief. They have been working hard together, and they've put together some information for this council. And it is the desire that we get information tonight and that we provide direction. So thank you so much, staff. I know it's 9:23 p.m. So thank you so much for sticking with us, and let's move forward. Laurie, I think you're starting us off. Is that right?
That's right. Thank you, Mayor. And I just have one question about how you do you want me to go through the staff presentation and then we do discussion and questions at the end? Would that be your preference?
Yeah, I think I'd like to hear from you, and then I'd like to hear from Brett, and then we'll do Q&A at the end. So council, let's hold our questions until the end. I think that might be the most effective. Thanks for asking.
Great. Well, thank you for this opportunity to present. Essentially, the purpose of this presentation, as the mayor said, is to provide some options for noise mitigation for OH vehicles within the city limits. And the background of the situation is clear. You heard it in the public comment in the citizens to be heard this evening. As the mayor mentioned, there were over 50, almost 60 citizens to be heard comments submitted.
50.
And then the chief and I have been receiving a number of emails over the past 2 weeks, probably in the range of 30, and the chief has received a number of phone calls. So it's significant. It's increased in proportion. The citizens are clear that they're weary of the noise, and that some longtime residents are thinking of moving away from the city because of the noise, that it's affecting their sleep, their ability to open windows. It's causing stress and anxiety. Descriptions of the situation, or people are calling it, it's maddening, it's intolerable, it's unbearable. And so what we want to do tonight is talk about the framework in which the city council has to address the noise issue, which we acknowledge is a problem. Moab is in a unique situation for a number of reasons, a very unique situation, unlike other cities, that we are in a valley, and the noise echoes of the walls of the valley. And the other issue that's unique is that we have the places where people generally like to take the OHV vehicles are accessed primarily through residential areas. So those two factors make our city unique from other areas. There are currently 5 OHV rental businesses in town, and they need to obtain a business license from the city, which is renewed on June 30th of every year. Currently, there are no noise or OHV noise restrictions tied to the issuance of that license. The main thing that we're going to talk about tonight is that the city is constrained by state law and current local law as to what we can do to address the OHV noise. And so I'm going to talk about state law, and I'm going to talk about local law, and then we're going to talk about some of the options that we thought of to address the noise problem. And I'm going to be straight up with you right now is the options that you have, the tools that you have to address the noise issue are not ideal. But we're going to talk about them, and the point of tonight is to discuss what, if any, you would like us to research further. So state law defines OH vehicles as type 1, 2, and 3 ATVs, motorcycles, and snowmobiles. State law also provides that OHVs can travel, street legal OHVs can travel legally on city streets. That's state law. And so the bottom line is, under state law, the city of Moab cannot prohibit street legal OHVs from traveling on our streets. The state law also, there's been discussion about mufflers and noise mitigation. State law does require the OHVs to be equipped with a muffler or other effective noise suppression system in good working order and constant operation. So also state law provides you can't use a muffler cutoff, bypass, or other similar device on a vehicle. The last thing I want to mention about state law is that it is very clear that local law cannot conflict with the state law that I've just explained. I've hit some of the relevant points, but essentially state law trumps our local law. In the city of Moab, we have general noise regulations. We have chapter 1774 of our municipal code, which talks in general about prohibition on unusually loud noises, excessive, unnecessary, or noise that is a detriment to public health for convenience, safety, or welfare. The key provisions of our local law on noise are in section 1774-080, where we talk about the municipal code specifies at what distance noise is measured and at what decibel level. It is a section that can be clarified because right now at a public right of way, the noise is measured at a distance of 50 feet. But the decibel level at which is a violation isn't really included in that section. It's included in the next section. So it's a little confusing, but the noise level at the decibel reading is 65 decibels. This noise ordinance does apply to recreational vehicles, snowmobiles, and other vehicles on a public right of way. Our local law also mirrors state law in requiring mufflers without a bypass or cutoff or similar device. So that's where we are with state and local law. We have a general noise ordinance. We don't have any specific law or regulation regarding OHVs. OHVs would follow under our general noise ordinance, and we are constrained by state law as to what we can do. The key restriction on the state law is essentially that we cannot put any restrictions on OHVs in the city of Moab that we don't put on all vehicles. The enforcement for our noise ordinance falls within the purview of our chief of police and the public works director. And so the chief and I have been working really closely on this issue to figure out what options we have. The chief was kind enough to reach out to some other communities to see how they've addressed the issue. And we come back to the conclusion that Moab is in a really unique situation. The chief and I did not find any other communities that are in the same situation that Moab is in. I raised in my staff report one town that we contacted, the city of Laverkin. Their chief explained that they don't have a lot of noise complaints, and that really they don't have the kind of issues in their police department that we have with enforcement here. Some other cities, I did a lot of research on other cities. Some other cities have an OHV section of their municipal code, which addresses multiple things where they would have a specific decibel limit for an OHV. The general decibel limits for particularly OHVs are in the 93 decibel to 99 decibel range. And as Councilmember Duncan mentioned, he went out with a noise metering device, not a certified one, but a less expensive type of device, and found that, you know, that those decibel readings are quite high. And Councilmember Duncan, when we get to discussion, will you please, I would love to hear more about what types of vehicles had what type of decibel ratings from your sort of field experimentation. What we are now getting to is the point of what can we do about the noise problem. And so the next part of this presentation is to talk about the tools that you have to address the noise issue that are available to you under state law. And the first one I would like to talk about is the city investing in some type of noise metering device and issuing citations. And I would like to have the chief present on this because he's done a lot of legwork, but the method for this would be using a sound metering device. And what you would need to do is have an established decibel limit, and you would need to have that decibel limit measured at a certain specified distance. And you need to be able to isolate the sound to the extent where your decibel reading would hold up in court and measured against an established threshold. So Chief, if you're okay, I will turn the portion of the presentation over to you for discussion of this method. I think you're on mute.
How is that?
You are good.
Can you hear me? Okay, excellent. Thank you. The first method that we are considering is something similar to what you would see in a DUI checkpoint, except in this case, the violation that we would be looking for would be related to sound emitted from the exhaust of OHVs and other vehicles. As Lori has alluded to, if we do a checkpoint, we have to pull a standardized, we have to standardize the way that we're pulling vehicles in. So we can either pull in all vehicles, every third vehicle, every fifth vehicle. We can decide how we want to do that, but we cannot target only OHVs. So if we say that we're pulling in every vehicle, that's going to include OHVs, cars, trucks, motorcycles, RVs, etc. So every vehicle would have to come through the checkpoint. The cost to do that, the cost to purchase a single certified calibrated sound meter that would be acceptable by the court runs somewhere in the $3,200 to $3,300 per unit range. We would need probably 2 of them to do that. The manpower required to operate a checkpoint like that, most DUI checkpoints use 8 officers. Like we could probably do a sound checkpoint with 6. We would know more after we did one, whether that was sufficient. So we may need as many as 8. Those costs for staffing would range for each checkpoint. For a 6-hour checkpoint would range anywhere from roughly $1,400 to a little over $1,900. The checkpoint, if we're using that 6-hour standard, the checkpoint would be 4 hours for the checkpoint, with 1 hour for setup and 1 hour for teardown. we would operate that for that period of time. The checkpoint, any checkpoint, whether it's a sound checkpoint or a DUI checkpoint, et cetera, has to be advertised. First, it has to be approved by a court or the court, and then it would have to be advertised for 2 consecutive weeks in a local newspaper prior to the checkpoint being run. So it is possible. There are some significant expenses with it, and in other areas where these types of measurements have been done, you have to be able to isolate the noise or the sound. So you can't do them on the side of the road. We would have to find an area that is a sufficient distance away from the road where we could pull vehicles in, isolate one vehicle at a time, away from other vehicles, away from any other type of sound or noise to get an accurate reading on the meter. So logistically, there are some challenges. Financially, there are some challenges, but this is one of the options that we've discussed.
Great, and thank you, Chief. And I think that, oh, if you don't mind muting, thank you. The pros and cons of this, the pros I think are one, it is a tool that you can do that wouldn't conflict with state law, and that it is a tool you have that would address all types of vehicle noise, not just OHV vehicle noise. I think the thing that the chief and I are struggling with the most on this one is that the cost and how do you isolate the noise and measure it accurately so that a citation could hold up in court without the cost and expense of running what is similar to a DUI checkpoint. And so the concept of measuring the noise and giving someone a citation, it needs to measure the noise and have it be attributable to the vehicle that you're citing. If you just measure noise in a specific area and don't have the ability to prove that it was coming from a particular vehicle, then there's no point in us being out there. So for example, if someone could say, well, you know, you just pointed the metering device at my vehicle, there was a leaf blower blowing in the background or a lawnmower was going in the background. As a city, we'd have to be able to prove that the sound emanated from the vehicle. And that's why the checkpoint is the way that we had thought of to do this. Lots of folks in the industry know, and I had been corresponding with some folks who have more knowledge than me about measuring, but measuring the noise emanating from an OHV, whether it's you know, in the field or you know, when it's manufactured, there is a protocol that you need to follow to do that, so that you can actually do it, so that you know that the sound is coming from the vehicle. And there's an industry standard that has been provided kindly by one of the folks in the OHV community. It's the SAE J1287 standard. So there is an industry standard for measuring vehicle noise from OHVs. And there's also a US Forest Service, I believe they have a standard as well, but there are protocols available for that. The next thing we wanted to talk about is designated OHV routes. And this is basically the creation of a city ordinance indicating that there are certain designated OHV routes through the city of Moab. And the thing I want to mention about this is it could not be a mandatory route. It under state law, we could not mandate that OHVs use a different route. It would just be a suggested route. The pros of this is that hopefully streets on the non-designated OHV routes would see a decrease in noise. The issue with that is we've seen a lot of correspondence from residents that the noise travels. And so that would be a con of this proposal, is that noise travels, and we've received a lot of communication from citizens that they are several blocks away from some of the routes that are used, and they still hear a lot of the OHV noise. So, you know, adjacent streets may still hear OHV noise. We wouldn't be able to mandate the use of these routes, and then we would need public education, which requires funding, And also we would need, you know, to make sure that there is signage or some type of in group email to the industry so we get the word out there. The third idea that we had was local regulation of OHV companies. So some type of muffler noise mitigation requirement. This would be a requirement that a local OHV rental company would comply with a certain decibel limit for a set standard for their rental fleet in order to obtain a business license. The pro with that is that machines rented locally would be compliant with a set noise level. The cons with that are as the gentleman mentioned in public comment earlier this evening, it is there already is a requirement for mufflers and noise mitigation on machines. It is oftentimes the aftermarket exhaust that is the issue. And so this would not address machines that were coming into town from privately owned persons. And it may be a perception, but it's worth pointing out right now that it is not the perception. It is the local OHV rental companies that are having the noise issue, because there is a muffler noise mitigation requirement already, as you saw under state and local law. The other cons would be that this wouldn't be retroactive. It would only be a going forward type of measure. And again, it would require enforcement from the city to go and inspect vehicles at the local rental companies, or there would be some need for verifying, in fact, the local rental companies were complying with any noise mitigation requirement. The fourth idea is a moratorium on new local rental OHV companies. This would be by the council acting a resolution limiting issuance of new licenses to OHV companies. The pro, of course, is self-explanatory. There would be no new OHV rental companies within city limits. The cons would be that a new OHV rental company could locate in Grand or San Juan counties should they not have the same restriction. And again, getting back to the issue of, is it really the local OHV companies that are creating the issue with OHV noise? The fifth option is a local opt-out of the state law. And this method is to have the city lobby the state legislature to allow Moab an opt-out of the state law, which allows street legal OHVs on city streets. The pros is that the vehicles would not be permitted to be on city streets. The con is that this would not address the noise from other types of vehicles that we've received concerns about, such as trucks or other loud vehicles. And I know I've gone through this quickly, but it is late in the evening, and so I'm trying to be respectful of everyone's time. The last thing is, other ideas. And the conclusion being that there are some short-term, medium-term, and long-term options. And I will emphasize again that they are not ideal options for your consideration, but they are, I tried to lay out the positives and negatives. And at this point, what we would like to do is have input from the council, the chief and I, about which options you think we should look into further. And then, of course, possible action at the joint meeting with the county on October 20th at 2 p.m. And Mayor, did you want to talk about the number 5 bullet point at all at this point, or at what point would you like to?
Us pursuing legislative action?
Absolutely. Or if you wanted to just loop that into the general discussion, or however you prefer.
Well, can I just add a couple additional possibilities? But I just I want clarification from you on one of two of them. The first would be a speed limit for UTVs. So I think based on my interpretation of state law, we are restricted from doing that. But could we as Moab City say, everywhere you go, your speed limit is 15?
So you are, you have a two-part question. I'm going to answer both parts. Yes, you are. My interpretation of state law is as yours is, that we cannot put an OHV specific speed limit, and nor could we put an OHV specific curfew, just adding that in as well. So my interpretation of state law is the same as yours. Could we, across the board, reduce the speed limit for all vehicles?
This is my part too. So then the alternative is, would we as a city, is this problem so significant that we as a city would be willing to have either an across the board speed limit reduction? Or could we say, unless you're driving home to your residence, you like we would have like no driving from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. at all, except for Main Street. And unless you're like driving home, could we actually do that?
So or
if your emergency vehicles or law enforcement. Brett,
right.
You get around.
Yeah, the chief and I talked about just an across the board type of a curfew like that. And there would need to be, as you mentioned, exceptions for, you know, people going home or emergency vehicles. There were some things that chief looked at, and there were a number of reasons why you would still be allowed. But you could, if you felt that a citywide curfew at a certain point for all vehicles was necessary, you could do that.
I mean, I figured I'd just throw out, you know, another silly to go along with what feels like a list of very difficult ways in which we as a community are looking to mitigate noise.
Mayor?
Yep.
Before we give a lot of feedback and a lot of direction to staff, I'd like a chance to read those 58 comments and see if there are suggestions in there that maybe we have not thought of. Hopefully there are some, rather than just the same comments that we hear over and over again. But I think it's, if there are comments in there that are helpful and that are different ideas, I think it's better if people can help solve their own problems rather than we dictate how we are going to solve them for them. So I would like a chance to just read through those.
Okay, thanks, Tani. And Karen?
I was just going to say that counter to that, there's so many people that have been having this discussion for years and years and are just really frustrated. So to go through, I mean, I think they're looking for legislative decisions to help with the issues that they feel like are not being addressed. And so I'd like to kind of figure out what we can do as a body to move forward to actually try to make some real change.
Mike?
Yeah, clarification, Brett and Lori. The J1287 standard was originally written for motorcycles. It's an SAE, Society of Automobile Engineers standard. It is 96 dB. It's measured at 20 inches, not 20 feet. 20 inches from the rear of an exhaust on a motorcycle at a 45-degree angle. I don't know why they did that one. One thing you guys need to know is that while you can write standards for so many dB at a certain distance, doesn't mean you can't measure at other distances. You just have to compensate for the change in distances. You guys are all aware that the farther away you get from something, the quieter it gets. And sound typically tends to spread out in a spear, and you can compensate for that mathematically. So if you get a reading at one distance, it's easy to turn that into another reading that you would get if you had been at a slightly different distance. And And Brett, with all due respect, thank you so much for considering the checkpoint idea. I don't think it'll work for one reason. Typically, vehicles make noise. I don't know how you're going to do this in a closed off checkpoint area. They got to be traveling along a road at a certain throttle, for one thing. And the JAT 1287, by the way, is very specific about certain throttle speeds. Sometimes red line is used, sometimes half of red line is used, sometimes there's still another specified RPM, and we will be spending forever and ever arguing about what the right thing to use is. So that's a mess. I claim it's much easier just simply to pick out a noise standard that the town wishes to enforce and watch them go by with a peak reading meter. And I just want you guys to make clear, just if one vehicle makes 80 dB of noise, by the way, Lori, that was a real typical number, 81, 2 dB. If a second vehicle comes by close by, you don't get 160 dB, you get 83, all right, because the noise powers add, this is a logarithmic measurement for what it's worth. So it's not nearly as bad as you guys think. So I do want to keep that noise reading meter procedure in mind. And anyway, so I will stop. Thank you.
Thank you. It's really nice to have that technical expertise on our council. Thank you, Mike. Kaylin?
Yeah, thanks, Lori and Brett, for coming up with these options. One thing that I'd like to point out regarding who's responsible, I think it's Salt Lake County and City that the health department is also in the game, because noise is a health issue. It affects us in multiple ways. So I don't know if our health department wants to be involved, but I'd just like you to consider that. You mentioned that the noise meters are directional. So I wonder if one way to handle the measuring moving vehicles is to have multiple noise meters, some measuring ambient noise in other directions on the roadway, and then one that's measuring the vehicle in question. And then also, given the citizen that we heard earlier, if the issue is racing mufflers, I wonder if you could have a checkpoint and check for mufflers on ATVs as well as other vehicles, which wouldn't involve noise meters at all. So, but in any event, I would encourage you to pursue the checkpoint idea more.
By the way, Brett, I wanted to add that same 1287 spec says that the ambient noise has to be 10 dB less than the target vehicle you're trying to measure. So that's a measure of the kind of separation, if you will, that they insist on. And that's the same kind of idea we could apply trying to tag vehicles from the side of the road.
Ronnie?
I took a lot of time to read the Citizens to be Heard forms people sent in, and I still am not done. But I guess it would help me to go through some of the suggestions people have made, and just to have, Lori kind of nod, just to confirm for those people who took the trouble to write us about, yeah, that is something that we could consider, or no, it isn't for this reason. And you've already gone through some of those, Lori, but I also had some folks send me messages from our state representatives, which I think it's important that we all acknowledge what they're telling us, so here is a response that came to one of our residents, and she writes, I have communicated with our Utah State Representatives Watkins and Albrecht and others in the last few days about the problems I think we face by following UTV vehicles on our streets, by allowing them. They say they're unwilling to address state law until all our local leaders, elected and law enforcement, take a stand by enacting law and enforcing existing municipal law. So I think if you read a lot of what we've gotten, first of all, there seems to be a misunderstanding among some of our representatives and some residents that we don't have a noise ordinance. So I don't know how many times we can reinforce that, but we do have one. It does sound like it needs improvement. It also seems like there's a disconnect because the state set us up with the law where they're now wanting us to enforce it, but it's kind of like an unfunded mandate because to enforce it, you need a lot more officers and a lot more technology. And fancy that, they set us up with something without the money to actually do that. I also think there's a misunderstanding about how easy it is to enforce, as the chief and Lori are demonstrating. Is quite complicated. It's fraught with legal problems, and there seems to be a very big misunderstanding there. We've done our legal research, and our legal research shows you can't set a separate speed limit for OHVs, but I'm reading through the responses, and we have had people from other parts of the state tell us, oh, we'll just set a different speed limit for them because that's what we do. So I guess one of the questions is, do we go ahead and do that? And if we get sued, all of those communities are going to be on there with us. Let me read to you this submission from the president of Utah's largest TV group, which I appreciate that he reached out to us and he wants to help. So he made suggestions and he said, solutions I would strongly encourage to be considered: lower the speed limit for UTVs on residential roads. I wonder why we didn't think about that. Lowering the speed drastically decreases the sound from a UTV. This would have a huge impact on the noise in town. So I do feel like we're all struggling because we're trying to do the right thing, but then we're told at one turn we can't do something, and another that we should be doing it. So there's a long list of other things here people have suggested, but it looks like Joel wants to comment.
I think you make excellent points, Ronnie. I find it laughable that they say, well, you have a tool bag, go use your tool bag. Everything that was in our tool bag that was easy to enforce and easy to get convictions and easy to hold up in court, they took away from us. You can't set your own speed limits. You can't set designated routes. You can't set curfews. Anything that we could have just done to easily solve this problem, they said, oh, you can't do that. Oh, you can't do that. Oh, they only left us the ones that they know we can enforce. So I don't have a disagreement with what you're proposing. If we want to set a different speed limit and the policy is we're willing to fight the fight, that's perfectly reasonable to take the stand. But that's a question for council. That's a policy-driven question.
Well, I'm pretty sure we've been told by our own representative, and someone correct me, but in Richfield that they have their own speed limit.
I can show you ordinances from communities where they have curfews. But they've set the rules to say you can't do that. So the question is,
who is the curfew? Is it Hurricane that's the curfew?
Most of the cities.
Sorry, who's the community that is the curfew?
Most of the cities that have curfews predate the state legislature when they took it away, and they've never changed their ordinances.
Who has the ordinance of, do we know?
Let's talk about that after the meeting. I don't want to start naming people and pointing out to the legislators other people who we know are not following the rules. I don't want to do that.
At any rate, I'm not raising this to be problematic, but because I feel like our residents have a right to understand the kind of pickle that we're in, because on the one hand, we're being told by the people who wrote the legislation that we should just have an ordinance and enforce it, but legally we can't. So given all of that, I'll let someone else digress, but I did go through a lot of the comments from people, and I'm happy to read out some of the suggestions people had. Of the 5 things that Lori and Brett suggested, I would support doing all of them except for the designated routes, because being someone who lives in a very busy area, for people watching on 200 East, between 100 South and 300 South, I know how much noise and traffic there is. I know how it travels. I think we're a very thoughtful community that, doesn't want to put the burden on any particular area. And I think we all feel for those people who live on that strip of Mill Creek going up to Sand Flats. And I would be the last person who would want to exacerbate that for certain parts of town. So I think you will see in a lot of the comments that was the one that people were less supportive of. I do think there are a lot of ideas out there. I want to thank the mayor for raising the lower speed limit idea. I mean, it is an idea I've thought of as well, because the vehicles are not as loud when they're traveling at a slower distance. That means that everyone in town would be traveling at a slower rate. And I'm sure that would get aggravating, but maybe it would get more letters written to the state. I don't I don't know. I mean, and I think it would require more enforcement. And I think we're willing to try and find a way to get the chief some more people. Other things that people asked about were, tickets. Let's be Wellington South. Let's make ourselves a reputation. And then everything from more staff from the chief to let's see, people raising the fair point, I think, of, we talk about the rights. A lot of people, well, a few people have written us, maybe 3 I've seen so far, about the rights of these vehicles and picking on one type of vehicle, or at least I think a lot of people are writing us about, not just UTVs, but, trucks, motorcycles. So let's just talk about it in that way. But then a lot of people have raised the point of, what about the rights of residents? Like, what's their right to sit at their home and hear themselves in their yard, or heaven forbid inside when you're talking to your children, or you work at home and you're trying to have a work call or a work meeting. I can attest to working for someone who has this problem, where you can't have a conversation. Even with your windows closed, that's a problem. And I think that's a problem ultimately for our economic development too. Some, I think, really good practical solutions about how we market the town. Should we be marketing the town as a location to come for loud activities? Or do we want to shift to promoting it for, quieter activities and celebrating quiet, just in the same way we celebrate dark skies or public lands. Let's see, I won't read everything, but I think if we are going to look at rewriting or revamping the noise ordinance, people have raised, I think, the very timely issue of things like the flying parachutes. And I think this, if you're going to rewrite it, that is something you want to read up on the FAA rules, but then also understand what, if any, local decisions the city or county can make. As I understand them, FAA controls airspace, but the city and the county could have a say in launch, taking off and landing. Let's see. I do think part of this discussion at some point has to involve the public lands agencies, because they're getting impacted too. It's not so much going to help us with our city thing, but they are part of this larger discussion. And just in the way that this was an unfunded mandate in terms of giving us enough officers, the federal government hasn't given them enough either. So, what's the BLM going to do when they have 2 officers for an entire district? I will spare you what my husband, who's a pilot, says is the decibel reading of his jet, but I would advise that the city keep that 65 decibels that's in our noise ordinance. Let's see, what else? I guess some questions were raised, like about tonight, about that aftermarket exhaust. Could you only allow companies on the road, outfitters, and have other people trailer? It feels like that wouldn't happen until if and when you could change the state law. So maybe I can answer that one myself. And I think some people have made the good point that, one may not be noisy, but when you have whole groups of, like, people have been mentioning to me, they count 6 to 30 at a time. That definitely has an increased impact. And I think the folks who made these laws need to understand that. And, I don't think we should forget we have hotels that give out earplugs. How is that for our economic development? Again, I mean, I would support all of the 5, except for that one about designated routes. I'm done.
Thank you, council members, for sharing your thoughts. I've got a couple thoughts I want to share. So I had like I said earlier in this meeting, I had a 2.5-hour phone call with Ben Burr of the Blue Ribbon Coalition and Bud Brewing of UTV Utah. And we went back and forth about what, how can we partner with the UTV community to solve for the noise issue, because the UTV community needs to hear very clear that Moab is at a breaking point in terms of noise. And it's because the industry is incredibly successful and it's a whole lot of fun. And there's a lot. There's a lot of that recreation happening here. And so we're at a breaking point, and we are in need of a partnership with the UTV community, and we are in need of some compromise, because that is if we can't find compromise, then this council is going to set up a checkpoint and spend thousands of dollars and waste our chief and our officers running checks when they should otherwise be dealing with bike theft and other, the things that officers are trained and meant to do in our communities. And Brett, I'm sorry so much of this falls on your shoulders, because that's not fair. It's not fair to you, Chief, and it's not fair to your officers. What I think is, and what we were going back and forth with on our conversation is that we need compromise. And what I ask is that whatever compromise we come up with, whether it's designated OHV routes or a reduction in speed limit for UTVs that's specific, that whatever we agree to, that we agree in a way that gets codified at the state level, because that is the way in which we can say, all right, we've come to an agreement here. And so that is my plea to the UTV community. And we can look at these other things. We're going to have our joint meeting with the county, so we're going to obviously read all the comments and meet with our county partners who are receiving the same concerns, and they're also dealing with the Rally on the Rocks event, and they're grappling with how to deal with the noise that is generated from that event. I just want to say that, again, we need a partnership and we need a compromise with the UTV community. Otherwise, again, what are we going to do? A checkpoint on the way up to Sand Flats? I mean, that might be where we land. And that's going to be a really negative recreation experience for the people that are coming to visit our amazing community. So let me ask you this, Laurie, and our city attorney, Laurie, and our chief, Brett. You put forward items for us to consider with, time and cost. What are your recommendations?
I think easy, Mayor, you hit the nail on the head, across the board reduction in speed limit. And, you could certainly do that. As Mike, Councilmember Duncan pointed out, that, when someone lets off the accelerator, it seems as though the decibel reading from the vehicle is lower. So a citywide reduction in speed limits, you can, Mayor, you're right. The other cities with OHV speed limits and curfews, they haven't been challenged in court as far as I can tell. So, you could do a citywide curfew for vehicles, and we could try and structure something for that. You could certainly tie the local business license for OHV vehicles to some type of decibel reading. We need to figure out what that decibel reading is, but also you could put a moratorium on new OHV rental businesses. I think the citizens are at their breaking point, as you said, and they want an immediate solution. And I think the bad news is that none of these solutions are the mute button that the city is looking for. But I think that any number of these options shows that you want to address this issue, and that's very clear from the discussion tonight that we're all on the same page. We want to solve this problem. It's just the tools we have aren't great.
I have one more question. what is the citation if you violate the noise ordinance? What money do we get if somebody breaks that ordinance? How much do they pay us?
$11 million.
$1,000, and we did a checkpoint, we might make some money. We might make back the big sound booth that we run the machines through. No? All right.
You want me to talk about it or not?
Yes, please.
Your ticket on something that would be very negligible, $80 to $100, would have to go through the court system. The state automatically takes a large percentage of any of our fines. That automatically goes away. What's left gets half between us and the court, and then gets halved again. So you're going to get pennies on your investment. That's how that structure works.
So, I mean, if we were really targeting the bad actors, we still.
The fact of the matter is when Wellington targets you for speeding through Wellington, it's because they don't want you speeding through Wellington. They're not making a lot of profit off of it, even though people they make a killing. They don't. They don't want you speeding through their town. That's what it boils down to. So if we want to set a different speed limit, like Ronnie was saying, there's a possibility, and become to fight the fight, is something we can do as well.
Karen, you had your hand up, and then Tawny.
So last year we were in this same predicament in the fall, and everybody was at their limitus, and we did do a checkpoint. How successful was that? I mean, there is something about, telling a story, and if we are really strict for a couple months, I mean, and we're doing traffic stops for everybody, there's more infractions, not just OHVs. I mean, I'm off of Mill Creek Drive and Mill Creek at Sand Flats, and I mean, as I was trying to make a turn, there was 6 UTVs that didn't stop through the stop sign, and also trucks, and also cyclists. So I mean, it's not it. There is some bad vacationers who come here, and somebody who has speeded and been pulled over by our chief before. I've been a bad actor in my car. So if we do a reduction in speed limits, is it possible that we don't include bicycles maybe? And no, can they go above 15? That's so slow.
I don't know if we could exclude bicycles from that speed limit.
Well, we would encourage people to be in their vehicles. I don't know. I'm trying to point positive.
The chief, we can look into it. I think the definition of a vehicle may not include a bicycle. So we could specify the number.
But that aside, so last year, I had to testify to legislators, and there was a lot of support to do a carve out for Moab because we are a resort community, and from one of our and he's not even our representative, but was willing to co-sponsor a bill to help us in our situation with OHVs, because when he approved allowing OHVs, he never even imagined that we would be inundated the way that we are in our downtown and our neighborhoods. So I mean, why wouldn't we try to just go to the state, who are the ones who created this issue for us in the first place?
Well, and I think that that's good direction for our joint meeting with the county. And I think at that meeting, we need to be able to answer that question as a team. Tawny?
I have a quick comment and a question for the chief. I think in addition to the noises, like Karen said, there are a lot of bad vacationers that come here, and they're the ones that drive around with the profanity laced flags and flip people off, and they do, and yell out their windows at you and honk at you if you're going the speed limit. I think as much as it is the noise, it's that attitude that people are tired of. It's like those people have given Moab a giant middle finger, and we don't have to play by the rules because you can't make us. And that's the attitude. That's reflects badly on the people that do come here and play by the rules. And I know that there are people that do that. So I think in addition to addressing just the noise, it's the attitude that we have to communicate back to the organizations that sponsor these events. The question I have for the chief is there a designation of an officer that you can train that just does those checkpoints? Or do you have to have your fully certified officers doing those? Is there, this is going to show how old I am. They used to have meter maids. All they did was give tickets on cars where your meter ran out. Is there a designation of an officer that you can have that will eliminate you using your fully trained officers? You're muted.
You're muted, Brett.
Thank you. I don't have the ability to unmute myself, so I have to wait for, I think it's Summer, to unmute me.
How did she do that? Can we do that with all men?
Oh! Chief, I suggest you don't answer her question.
It's past 10 p.m. Coming out. I can't in Zoom, Tony.
I don't have a definitive answer to your question. I think we could use, there are two levels of law enforcement officers in Utah. There's one called the special function officer, which is, they attend the first 6 weeks of the academy to learn essentially law. And then you have your fully sworn category 1 officers who are police officers that have all the rights and duties that any of our officers do. I think it's possible that we could use special functions officers to do that, but I'm not entirely certain. I would have to look into it. If we did, I mean, there's still the issue of staffing. We don't have a staff level now that would allow us to run checkpoints. Frankly, we don't. We need, I won't even say the number of officers that we need in this meeting right now, but I can tell you that without several additional officers, we don't have the capability to run a checkpoint.
Is there a possibility we could borrow officers? We could have another.
Possible. You know, we could potentially, if the sheriff's office was interested in working with us on it, we could potentially split the staffing responsibilities with them so that we would supply 3 and they would supply 3. We would most likely have to do that as an off-duty employment for our folks, because right now, every day they're running call to call. We don't have the time to free them up to do a checkpoint. So we would have to set it up as an off-duty or an overtime job. And I can tell you from experience, because all of my officers are working overtime every single pay period, nobody is going to volunteer to come in and work on their off time.
I know.
And I don't blame them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we need to wrap up here. So Joel.
Mayor, I just want the chief, Karen made the comment that we had done the traffic stop checkpoint last year, and she wanted to, like, if the chief could speak to that real quick.
Am I still live? Okay. We did not do a checkpoint last year. There had been discussion around it. We looked at what was required to do it, and we didn't have, just as is the case now, we didn't have the people nor the funding to operate a checkpoint. I think it was also, if I recall correctly, it was very late in the season, and by the time we would have been able to do the checkpoint, including the 2 weeks of advertisement in a local paper, getting all the materials together to do the checkpoint, getting the officers, the staffing to do it, we would have been into the winter when there really isn't much traffic to begin with. So it really would not have been effective.
So what did we do, chief, last year?
We continued to do what what enforcement we could on a daily basis.
Ronnie?
I'm just wondering, moving forward, I mean, I didn't hear anyone else necessarily talk about the 5 things you guys put forward, but I'd be really interested in those possibilities aside from, the designated routes, to have a little more information on cost. Like, it helps me to know like how many officers you would need, and what the cost of that is. Because I think our community, like Lori says, or we all know, is totally at a breaking point, and they want to see, our values and our budget as a result, showing that we're reflecting, investing in them. So I think it just helps to know what kind of investment this would take to enhance their quality of life. No pressure tonight, but it might help to see some numbers.
We have those numbers. That's all.
Okay, I'll get them from you.
We're happy to put something together and bring more information back to you.
It might help the county too. Yeah.
So it's 10:20 and we need to move 10:22 and we need to move forward. We have a few more agenda items tonight. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Chief, for City Attorney Lori, for joining us tonight and having this conversation. Certainly not over, and definitely, let's have good communication between now and meet with the county on October 20th at 2 p.m. And unless there are any other burning comments or questions that people have, I think we need to move on. Okay, nobody's burning. We're moving on to 8.2. Proposed resolution 38-2020, a resolution approving the lot consolidation of properties located at 1315 and 1317 Dream Drive, Moab, Utah 84532. There's a briefing and possible action on our agenda. Corey, thank you so much for waiting until 10:23 p.m. And normally I know that you make presentations, but I'm just wondering if the council, will you just raise your hand if you'd like a presentation? You would like the presentation. You would not like the presentation.
No, I was just gonna make
it's running late.
I was gonna make a motion.
Okay, I'll take a motion.
I move to approve Moab City Resolution 38-2020, a resolution approving the lot consolidation of properties located at 1315 and 1317 Dream Drive.
Thank you, Karen. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Mike. Discussion?
I just want to thank Corey for explaining to me kind of the role of the HOA here with zoning and stuff. So thank you, Corey.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, I will call for a roll call vote. 1 sec. Tawny.
Aye.
Karen.
Aye.
Kaylin.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Ronnie.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. 8.3, sidewalk inventory discussion for future policy considerations. All right, we can do this very quickly. So Chuck, thank you for sticking around. And thank you for supplying us with the file that you did today. That gives us an overlay of the sidewalk inventory on the city. So what I'm hoping for is that 2 of you will volunteer to mask up and hang out at a table with me with our printed sidewalk inventory maps and make areas of policy suggestion where we can have a comprehensive look at where we do and do not have sidewalks so that we can amend policy to say all sidewalks required in the city except for these areas. I think it's something we've wanted to do for a while, and I think that's the action we need to take so that we can bring it back to the council and then and to the staff, and then move forward with changing policy if that's what we decide to do. Ronnie, you want to join?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to help. My only question was just so people understand. So, two of us would work with you to make some suggestions. We would come back to the group, and then presumably the public would weigh in, because I'm sure people have their own ideas about their neighborhoods, or I don't know what. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Kaylin?
I volunteer.
Amazing. Who's number 2? Mike. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I'll be happy to volunteer. You know that, Emily. So
Well, I know that this has been an issue that's frustrated you for some time, and you live in the part of town where there's that sidewalks are, and you walk quite a bit too. So Ronnie, I appreciate your volunteering, but I'd like to go with Mike if that's okay.
That's okay. More time to bake. Thank you.
Could you make us cookies for when we meet?
Put in your requests a few hours in advance. I will deliver.
Kaylin, when you get back, let's schedule that time. Chuck, thank you for the materials so that we could have this conversation and we can move forward so we can inform staff.
Could I have 15 seconds?
Oh, sure.
I just wanted to say that I had sent you a follow-up email to that map, and that I would encourage you to share that, or I will share it with council. The reason what that inventory represents. It represents 2 things: the ADA, American Disabilities Act status of those sidewalks, as well as the concrete condition. So when those reports, I think, would be enlightening. And if you need information from me as you go through them, I'd be happy to try and.
Well, the reason I didn't want to share those is because I figured with our little committee, we might be able to go through those and save the time of all council to work through that.
Okay.
So let us meet as a committee first, and then come back to the council. But we are definitely going to look at those things that you sent, and I really appreciate this, Chuck. Thank you so much. And thanks for sticking around till 10:30. Moving on, 8.4, appointment of Aaron Nielsen as the city's employee discipline hearing officer pursuant to Utah code. Lori.
Yeah, thank you. I just make this quick. Our employee handbook and Utah code require that we have a hearing officer to hear any disciplinary appeals we have from employees who have been suspended 2 days or transferred with a change in pay or discharged. And so we put out a request for proposal and received 2 resumes, 2 applicants for basically being the hearing officer. And Human Resources has reviewed the applications, checked the references, and spoke to Mr. Nielsen, and he is the recommended person for our hearing officer.
Thank you for that. Ronnie?
No, I'm happy to make a motion. I move to approve appointment of Aaron Nielsen as the city's employee discipline hearing officer pursuant to Utah Code annotated 10-3-1106 and the city's employee handbook.
Thank you so much. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Mike. Any discussion? Seeing none, I will roll call vote. Mike?
Aye.
Karen? Karen?
Unmute. Aye.
Ronnie?
Aye.
Connie?
Aye.
Kaylin?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Approval of the bills. Connie, is there a motion?
I move to pay the bills against the city of Moab in the amount of $1,879,071.50.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kaylin. Whoops. I will do a roll call vote. Oh no. I think I just.
Mayor, you want me to do it?
Yes, I can just pull it up real quick. Sorry.
Okay.
Mayor, you can just call. This is 5-0. Just call the vote.
I'm gonna follow the rules. Kaylin?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Ronnie?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. It's the money. We gotta do a roll call vote with money. And now this one, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all. Great meeting. Good work.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Lori, everybody, Joel, Carly.